That's quite a useful one. 2:58 is 2:05. 3 minutes is 2:06.5.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I'll leave it there. 3:02 is 2:08.
It's not working.
Yes.
It's working
Yeah.
slow. It's very slow.
We can't hear any.
Yes, can hear you, Guy. Yes.
Oh, can now.
You could be a bit louder, Guy. Guys, so we've actually got 3 minutes of the course graphic, yeah?
That's a long time, isn't it?
What, at the top of the show?
Yeah.
Right at the top.
Well, I mean, after the intro, we take a look at the course, and it's 3 minutes. So we need to probably do a bit of nattering around. So really, you've only seen the Jumeirah Beach Road, haven't you? That we drove down to the hotel the other morning.
Yeah.
Have you run on any of the course, Paula? No.
No, I don't think I have. I've walked around a bit of it the first year. Oh.
Actually, water, yeah.
You want to dash and get some next door?
No, it's all right. Go on a break. That's past results. Weather.
NBC, Tim. I don't think you get a break.
What?
It's not NBC. You don't get a break.
I thought we said we get 1 minute breaks in the meeting.
Oh, do we? Did we get breaks, Tim? I mean, Pep.
How do you manage that? It's all right. You just go when you need to.
Could do a Rob Walker.
Another Ethiopian triumph here in the men's race at the Dubai Marathon. This is an absolutely sensational performance by Ruth Chepngetich. It's coming up to 6 a.m. in Dubai. That means 10 a.m. in Tokyo and Beijing, 2 a.m. in London, 3 a.m. in Paris and Berlin, and 9 p.m. on Thursday evening in New York. But wherever you are, welcome to the 21st running of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. This is Pat Butcher with British Olympians Paula Radcliffe and Tim Hutchings beside me, and we're looking forward to another rapid race on this fast, flat Dubai course. Now, Well, as you can see, apart from the rare point-to-point course, of which I suppose Boston, slightly downhill, is the best example, there's very few turns on this Dubai course, as you can see. And the athletes all say that the road surface is probably the smoothest they've ever found in the world, partly which explains the very fast times that we've always had here in Dubai. Course records last year, which we're going to be taking a look at shortly. But there on the start line are the wheelchair athletes. Swiss winners the last couple of years, Marcel Hug and Sandra Graf are the favourites again. Any likelihood, Paula, of anybody contesting these races, maybe in the men's?
I think there will be some competition, certainly from Yamamoto and some of the athletes, but Hug really does stand head and shoulders above the others, and likewise Graf on the women's side.
Vanessa de Souza is here, the Brazilian, looking for a qualifying time for Tokyo. Of course, Olympic year this year.
I would be astonished, Pat, if Marcel Hug were beaten today, the silver bullet. I mean, he's been utterly dominant the last couple of years. Van Dijk, I understand Dijk well into his, I think, late 40s now, but if it were Hilly, he might be the man. You know, I think he's won Boston 9 times. He's so powerful and heavy that he loves those hills, especially the downhills. But this is such a quick course.
Just about 5 minutes until the elite start.
And I suppose the same principle applies for these guys, Pat, as it does for the able-bodied runners, and that is they love a dead flat course where they can get into a nice steady rhythm.
Well, let's we're going to have a look at some of the other contestants here in Dubai as we watch the wheelchair athletes going off.
I'm really ready, and I think I'll do my best here in Dubai, and I'm really happy to be here.
My training was great. We were training around like 3 months, like 12 weeks for this marathon at the altitude of Mexico City, around like 9,000 feet.
It's very confident because when I come to here for the second time, 2018, the 7th place, 2:04.44. Now I'm better too.
Of course, I'm really nervous, but I'll cope with it. No one is limited. Anything can happen.
Well, that was a quick look at some of the favourites, Ethiopians, Mexicans and Kenyans for this elite race.
1 minute.
So just jogging down to the start.
There is Saifu Tura, who we just saw talking very confidently. He talks about the fact that he would love to go below 2:03 today. Conditions looking tough to be able to do that, though. The temperature already around about 18 degrees, and we've been told the dew point is somewhere around 15 degrees, which makes it tough and fairly humid running out there for them.
Well, it's certainly much warmer than last year, Paula.
Yes, absolutely, and the wind seems to be a little bit higher too.
Well, about 4 minutes away from the start, there is the temperature. It was about 15 degrees, I think, last year, Paul. It certainly felt a lot colder, but quite warm this morning, so that may make a bit of a difference.
There is Pacheco, who's looking for his Olympic qualifying time as well here today.
And Pat, the usual total dominance from the Ethiopians, though. Suguru Osako, a fascinating entrant. He's a great track racer from years gone by. Member of the Oregon Project in North America, the Japanese, but he is the Japanese record holder and trying to impress the Japanese selectors either here or in Tokyo in a few weeks' time. The talk is that he will drop out at 25k. He's using this as a long, hard training run. But the Ethiopians, Pat, all of them here looking for very fast times. It's why they come here. This is a real point and press type race.
Well, when the race began 20 years ago, we did have 3 consecutive Kenyan victories, but since then Ethiopians have pretty much dominated the race, and certainly on the men's side they've got 13 victories out of 20, and the Kenyans, the other 7, has been even more dominant on the women's side, Paula. I think 13-3, because the first 4 victories were by Russian women.
Yeah, and then after that, I think the Ethiopian runners started to come here, started to produce very fast times, and Dubai quickly became known as the place to come early in the year, kick off the year with some very, very fast racing and set the bar for the year year ahead.
Well, you've had a look at the men's and the women's starters there. Their principal name, well, as you can see right there, is on their bib, so they're going to be fairly easily identifiable. .6 a.m. start, just about a minute away. Who do you fancy, Tim, in the men's race?
Crikey, there's a loaded question. I think there's about 14 of them who have broken 2:10, and you have to look at the guys who have been able to display consistency and have run quick this year. So Dexisa, for example, I think is possibly my man.
Well, there you go. And what about a quick rundown of the women's chances? I mean, Ruth Chepngetich did not come back last year's course record winner, 4th fastest in history. But Workness Jagesa, who was finished, well, not very far behind her, has got to be the big favourite, I suppose.
I think so, yes, particularly due to the fact that Jagesa not only hung with Chepngetich for much of the race and produced a very, very quick time here last year, but she backed that up with that victory in Boston, and she talked about how that really gave her the confidence boost to take it to the next level in marathon racing. So she's asked for a very quick time today. She's asked for the pacemakers to go out on 2:17 pace. Whether in these conditions they'll be able to do that remains to be seen, but she's definitely talking a big game that the others in the women's field don't really want to go with. They've asked for a slower pace for Dida and for Herpa.
Okay, because I mean she was the 6th fastest of all time in finishing 2nd last year. She won the race on her debut, incidentally, in 2017, finished 4th in 2018 and 2nd last year, so that's quite a history.
It is, and she's been up and down the positions-wise, but she's been consistently getting faster each year here in Dubai, so I imagine that she's trained very, very well for this race and comes here looking for another quick time to then go into the championship-style racing of Boston later in the year.
Incidentally, the mass race begins at 7 o'clock. These races were separated about three years ago when there was a bit of an incident at the start, a bit of bumping and boring by the masses behind the elites. So the decision was taken to let this basically three dozen people, or rather 4 or 5 dozen people, get off by themselves and get a good clear run. And in fact, just a few motorbikes. Certainly our cameramen are going to be right beside them for company in this early stages of the race.
Big responsibility on the pacemakers as well in a race like this, where the rhythm that athletes want to lay down is there for the taking. There aren't any undulations to speak of. There's very few corners, and therefore it's an opportunity that is fairly rare when you compare it with courses like Chicago, which is fast and flat but has about 41 corners, with London, which has a lot of undulations even though it's a fast course, and various others. This is almost Dutch in its flatness. You look at Rotterdam and Amsterdam, they're very, very fast courses for obvious reasons. We look at the geography of that nation as well, but it does put a little bit extra burden on the pacemakers to get their pacemaking right. And do you think, Paul, in a way it means that tactics become, you know, is there a correlation between the faster the race, the less tactics are an issue?
I think so, and I think that certainly suits the mentality of Ethiopian racing, of African racing, to be able to just go out and basically hang with the pace for as long as you can. And then it becomes more about how well you've trained and what you're capable of producing on race day, rather than actual race tactics coming into play to win the race. And you get a look there of just how straight the straightaways are on this course. Pretty much the only turn is that first turn as you go up from the start, and you turn at the Madinat and then head out to the first turnabout. That's the only issue, is that the turns are hairpin turns, which means they do lose a little bit of time on those turns, but there aren't too many of them.
Well, Tim, Paul has given us an idea of the sort of time and pace that Worknish de Geffer is looking for in the women's race. We've just seen 2:56 come up for the men. What about the pacing? What's the strategy there?
Well, the pacemakers have been tasked in the men's race, and of course there are plenty of pacemakers for the ladies. There's only 2 in the men's race, and unfortunately, unless you want to run at around 2:04, 2:04:30 pace, you're stuffed, because there are 2 pacemakers, Felix Kipkoech and Silas Kiptu, both Kenyan, who have been tasked with going out at 61:45 to 62 minutes for halfway. Obviously 2:03:30 to 2:04 pace. Very, very quick indeed, and you know there's not too many men who will be able to live with that beyond about 25k, and it's unusual, because a lot of the big races nowadays have pacemakers that with a little bit more sympathy for the guys who want to run 2:06, 2:07, 2:08. So you're pretty much on your own if you don't go out with those lead pacemakers over the first few kilometres. And 2:56, by the way, well, that's about 2:04 pace. Very, very quick, but pretty much spot on.
Well, as we take a look at the wheelchair racers at the head of their field, and that's Hoog and Van Dijk, I presume, Paula.
I don't think it's Van Dijk behind, but it's certainly the Silver Bullet with his recognisable silver helmet there. I think this is Van Dijk coming up now.
Yeah, you can usually spot Ernst Van Dijk, the South African, because of his size, his volume. He's got monstrous shoulders, and I think that might have been the Japanese behind Hoog just now. Well, I'm surprised how quickly they split up, though.
Yes, indeed, and there are half a dozen Japanese in the field, some of whom are a bit of an unknown quantity, so it will be interesting to see how long Hoog is going to be having the lead contested in this wheelchair race. Of course, these guys are extremely rapid. They're going to be back at the finish inside of about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes at worst, and the women too. Incidentally, Tim, you mentioned the sort of times that, or the pace that we're expecting here. The course record was set last year by Getanem Moller of Ethiopia, 2:03:34. So yeah, they're obviously looking for trying to knock about half a minute off that time.
Yes, they are. In fact, one of them is it Tura, who has said he thinks he can go under 2:03 today. Certainly not lacking confidence. But if they can knock half a minute off that, well, it'll put them in a very special, the winner, in a very special group. Sub 2:03 is a tiny, tiny club of athletes on the all-time list. But we mustn't take it for granted. And I must admit, I'm a man who's always preferred to see great racing, and that fast times are a bonus. And one of the ironies of this really quick race we're watching this morning unfold, and I've no doubt at all that it will be quick, is that so many of these Kenyans and Ethiopians have got one eye on Tokyo and the Olympics about 7 or 8 months away, and yet the Olympic marathon is notoriously tactical, and you have to be a really astute racer. This is one of those races where you turn up for a really quick time. You hardly have to think, you just have to hang on.
Well, just for the record, there are 10 men here with 2 hours 7 minutes or faster, and 2 sub 2:20 women and 5 more sub 2:25 for them.
Yeah, it just shows you the depth, and also highlights exactly why these athletes need to come here and produce a fast time, because it's all very well saying the Olympic marathon will be a tactical race, and it will be, but they need to run a fast time to get themselves onto that team and to even be there in Tokyo. I think that's what many of the athletes were looking for. And talking to Saifu Tura at the press conference, he was fairly unsure of what he actually needed to do to satisfy the Ethiopian selectors and to get the nod to be onto that team. And that's why I think they all want to come out and produce a very quick time to put their name up there, and hope that that is enough to keep them in the eyes of the selectors.
Well, we got name checks there for the 2 Kenyan pacemakers in the men's race, but inevitably at this stage there's a good dozen in that lead pack.
One athlete that is a very interesting debutante in this race is Eric Kiptanui, a 30-year-old Kenyan. It's a long-awaited debut from Kip Tanui. He's the 7th fastest half marathon runner in history with 58.42. That was in Berlin a couple of years ago now. But after initially being a pretty useful track runner, he's run about 3:37 for 1500. That's about 3:55 for a mile. He moved up to the roads and to the half marathon where he's really nailed it. And Kip Tanui could possibly, there he is, bring the title back to Kenya if he has a strong debut here today. It's a big ask, I suppose, to go down towards 2:03, 2:04 in your very first marathon. But Dubai is almost unique, Pat, in that it does have a habit of producing names out of a hat, out of almost nowhere, who come out and run 2:03, 2:04, 2:05.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, I mean, Kip Tanui, the extraordinary thing about him is he took half a dozen years out after being a decent schoolboy runner, and then only came back about 2016, and very quickly has got up into the elite level, such elite level that he was one of the pacemakers for Eliud Kipchoge in London last year, and certainly went through 61 minutes without too much of a problem, or 61 and a half.
Well, his coach, Renato Canova, has said recently that 2:04 is possible. We shall see. He had his fair share of injury problems in 2018. Did Eric Kip Tanui, but has had a good 2019 by all accounts.
Well, that's Tora right in the middle of the picture there, Paula, and he did seem pretty confident of 2:03 and even sub 2:03.
Yes, he did, and I think we have to add that note of caution that was maybe before they had really seen what the conditions were going to be like out there today, and I do think that will have a little bit of a bearing on this race. There was some reticence there from the bulk of the pack to go with the early pace in the first couple of kilometres, but now they have decided to commit and to get up there as we take a look back now, and this looks like the lead women's group.
Yeah, and there's a host of pacemakers here. Let me see, 6 pacemakers out there for the ladies. One pacemaker at 68.30 pace, which is obviously 2:17 pace. 2 pacemakers at 69.30, so around 2:18, 2:19 pace. And then one at 72-minute pace, which is 2:24 final time. And a couple of pacemakers at 73.30, which is, what, 2:27 pace. So for some reason, there's a massive pacemaker that's been laid on for the ladies.
I think they've pretty much come with individual pacemakers, so they've brought their own to be able to hit the exact times that they wanted to. But here it looks like it is that second pack. I don't see Worknesh de Gefer in there. The others are all there. Herpa is there, Tashomi is there, Dida is there.
Yeah, Kuma, you can see there in the white vest centre picture. She won Hamburg
and also
back in April.
On the far side in the blue is Facer, who is an interesting athlete making her debut, stepping up from 5,000 metres. Got very good credentials on the track, so it'll be interesting to see what she can do here.
Interesting couple right at the back of the pack there we just saw. It's a Kenyan Mexican woman, as we see Worknesh de Gefer here right out at the front. We got a brief glimpse of the Mexican Kenyan woman, Rispa Gesabwa Biaki, who's being paced by her brother, Rogers. She only became Mexican naturalized about 2 or 3 years ago. But anyway, quickly back to de Gefer, Paula. I mean, that's already a huge gap by the looks of it.
Yeah, and I think so. I think when you announce at the technical meeting the night before the race that you want to go out at 68.30, that certainly scares and intimidates the other women. And she's not got a huge leader at this point. You can see the chasing pack, or you could see the chasing pack in the background behind her there, but she certainly looks very committed. She's gone with the pace and looks very good at this stage, and that is Facer leading the group behind.
Well, we did see, Tim, that the first 3K in the men's race, they were all of those kilometres were under 3 minutes, so that's a fairly rapid pace too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's pretty much perfect. 2:58 per kilometre is 2:05 tempo. Remember that first kilometre was 2:56, so they're building up, well, what is a nice steady rhythm here, and heading down towards 2:04 territory. Very impressive. Be interesting to see how they drop off. There's Osako in the the white hat, Suguro Osaka, the 28-year-old Japanese, who has that Japanese record after his third place in Chicago. Back in 2018, he ran 2:05.50, but probably a little bit disappointed with his third place in the Japanese Olympic trial back in the middle of September, where he ran 2:11.41 for third place, and the first two got selected. Frustratingly, he just missed out on automatic selection. I know you touched on that, Paula, and that if things don't change, he probably will get the nod anyway for that third spot.
Yeah, I think he was frustrated with that third place in the trials. He was actually second coming into the stadium, but suffered a bit with a stitch in the closing stages and wasn't able to hold on to the second of the automatic qualifying spots. I think the rule of thumb they're roughly going by is, should anyone break that Japanese record, they will get that third spot. If they don't, he's fairly safe. There may be a kind of unofficial runoff for it in the Tokyo Marathon. But were he to run very fast today and establish another Japanese record, not only would that get him the 100,000 yen, but it would also probably tick his box for selection.
100 million, I
100
think,
million.
because that's what he got when he set the Japanese record.
What is that in pounds, shillings, and pence, or US
it's
dollars?
about 100,000, isn't it?
It's oh no, it's almost $1 million, about $900,000.
That's not a bad payday, is it?
Indeed not.
Right, I'm making a comeback.
You've got to run quite hard for it, and you're not Japanese.
Anyway,
5K.
he's wearing the white hat, so you can always pick him out.
14:42 at 5K there, Pat. So long way under 3 minutes per kilometre, and that is very encouraging indeed. At 14:42 at 5K, that means they're on schedule here for around about 2:03.30. 2:03.30 pace is 14:42.
Well, that's exactly the course record last year, 2:03.34, set by Gaetano Molla. So Dubai living up to its reputation thus far.
A fair bit of confusion there at that drink station as the athletes were diving for the tables. They are told in advance at the technical meeting which of the 9 tables their bottle will be on and in what order it will be placed on the tables, but every year we see this confusion and frantically looking around for their bottles. It seems like the majority have been able to get them at that first drink station.
It's not an exact science, is it? You know, and you so often in these big marathons see athletes struggling with. I'm never quite sure why they don't spread the tables out more. Why do the tables have to be so close together? Why don't they have the tables 20 meters apart? There's table 1 and then a big gap and then table 2. Spread them out over 150 meters. Don't crunch them all together over 30 meters. That's what creates the chaos.
Well, she did 2:17.41 in finishing second here last year, Agnieszka Geffer, and here she is with her pacemaker, otherwise in splendid isolation.
Well, she's coached by Gaetano Tessema, who is one of the global agency group coaches, who is incredibly experienced, used to be a pretty good coach himself. And that's a record of consistency is hugely reinforcing for the athletes. 16:22 at 5K.
Yeah, that's a very quick time, and also quick for the chasing pack there, just 17-18 seconds behind. You can see their pacemakers almost warning the women ahead that the drink stations are there. I think so often the athletes are focused on looking at what that 5K split is and forget that the tables are also at 5K, so they're checking the clocks, checking their watches, and then quickly remember that they have to dive for the drink tables also.
That 16:22, by the way, equates to about 2:18 tempo.
Okay, we're just going to have a look at Saeed Harib, the General Secretary of the Dubai Sports Council.
Definitely after 20 years, and you see this event is growing up and more, and you can see the number of the participating. And also, you don't forget that we are stuck in the same location. We don't change it, which is in the Jumeirah Road, and behind us, Burj Al Arab. And the number of the community is also increased. And today what we heard, the number of participating of the community from the local and women, that is mean that what we wanted to be a sport for the all, not only for professional people. And that is more important to make our city is a healthy city with the sport. And that is where we are looking for it. And this is also always our commander try to be push more and more for the community to be participating.
Well, that was Saeed Harib, the General Secretary of the Dubai Sports Council. And it's interesting that this race took about 10 years to get really established in the local community, but nowadays we're getting droves and droves of even Emiratis running, not just the expats who were in the original race 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting, Pat, because I've worked on the Rack Half Marathon for many years. It's about an hour across the desert from here. It's every February. And that is the vast majority of runners in that are expats. Very few Emiratis actually take part in that particular half marathon. So it's interesting that the marathon itself is the challenge that's been picked up.
Well, as we look at both the men's and women's times after 5K, we're going to be taking a look actually at some Vox Pops. That's to say, we're going to have a chat with some Emiratis who are actually running in the mass race, which begins at 7 o'clock in about 40 minutes time.
That's fascinating. Degefa at 5K has 17 seconds on the pack. So she's, what, about 80 or 90 meters ahead of that pack, the main pack of lead ladies. She is absolutely flying.
Still a big group here, as you can see. It's still night time. It's going to be at least another 40, 50, 60 minutes until daybreak here.
That last kilometre, Pat, 3:01. That's the slowest of the race, I think. So they've settled down a little bit. There we go. Look at those splits. All of them well under 2 minutes, under 3 minutes rather, apart from kilometre 6. I wonder if they've just taken a little turn into the wind. There is a bit of breeze about. I don't think so. I don't think they've taken a turn yet, have they?
I think they must be approaching the first turn. But I'm just looking in there. I can see Kiptanui, I can see Ballet. I can't see Solomon Dexisa in there, who was the pre-race favourite.
Surely he's got to be there at this stage.
Well, Dexisa was pre-race favourite by dint of his 2:04.40, which he ran in Amsterdam in 2018. But he's only 4 seconds faster than Tora, his colleague from Ethiopia, and he's the one who sounded far more confident at the press conference as we're talking about 2:03. Next guy up is Osako, 2:05.50, the Japanese. We've already talked about him. Another Ethiopian, Belay, 2:06. Abate 2:06.13, Bantier 2:06.23, Abeje 2:06.36. I mean, just imagine these would have been world records 20 years ago.
2:58, that's 7th kilometre, so they have got back onto a sub 3 minute schedule. Dexisa, I mean, yes, he set that personal best of 2:04.40 in Amsterdam in October 18, but just this last October, on the 20th of October, so not many weeks ago, he ran 2:05.16 for second place, so he was in great shape in October. I'd be really surprised if he's dropped back off this lead pack, what, some 21, 22 minutes into the race.
Well, he certainly seemed fairly confident at the press conference on Wednesday afternoon. And just on the right screen there, you can see that Marcel Hugger still got company.
I wonder if you get annoyed when somebody slipstreams behind you like that, absolutely tucked in really tight, because it is a huge advantage to be right and close behind somebody, and I would sort of half expect Hug to start moving around across the road from left to right just to make it harder for I think it's a Japanese tucked in behind him too.
I think it's a Chinese athlete, Tim. I think it's either Zhang Yong or Yan King.
As is so often the case with wheelchair races all over the world in every race. Apart from Hug's silver helmet, almost impossible to identify wheelchair races, and it frustrates we television commentators enormously, as it must frustrate you viewers, that they don't whack great big visible numbers on their shoulders or somewhere. It's not rocket science, surely.
Well, as you saw there briefly, Hug did relent in an attempt to get his contestant to come alongside or even take the lead, but he wasn't having any of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they have rules similar to that in cycling, where you're not, or certainly in triathlon, where you're not allowed to draft behind, because it is a certain advantage. Even in running, it is easier to run on someone's shoulder or to run right behind someone, but it's a bigger advantage when you're pushing in the wheelchairs.
Well, here's that men's pack, chatting to a couple of the Ethiopians over the last couple of days. They're very familiar with, Dexisa is there, in that orange and white vest. They are very familiar with getting up and running so early in the morning. They frequently get up at 5 a.m. and are out running at 6:30. So, well, it's not exactly my cup of tea. It's bread and butter to them. What about you, Paula? What time did you do your morning runs?
Not that early. I used to prefer
Not
to
surprised.
give myself time to wake up and to be able to do the harder workout of the day, be it track session, road session, or the harder long runs in the morning. I think come race day, if the race is an early start, you're always going to be awake and ready to race.
But most days, what time was your morning run?
9 o'clock.
Yeah, very sensible. Well, to my way of thinking anyway, which isn't necessarily the right way of thinking. There's De Geffer. Pat, I cannot believe the lead she's built up. I suppose the only thing, Paula, and you're familiar with this, is that the male pacemakers for these super elite ladies, that at least the ladies know they can be there right to the finish line if needs be. They can be there every step of the way, whereas male pacemakers always drop out in a men's race at around, at best, 30k, something like that.
Yeah, and that's something that's definitely changed in recent times. It used to be very, very hard because the depth isn't there on the women's side to be able to get female pacemakers to go any kind of distance within the race. So with female pacemakers, rarely people would go past halfway, I think, with me, and that's when they started to bring in the male pacemakers, and certainly it was much easier to run in a mixed race. That's not as good for TV though, but these women have actually brought training partners with them, so they're used to running with them on a day-to-day basis as well. And I think for De Geffer there, just to settle in beside her training partner, behind her training partner, and just to almost be able to switch off and settle into the rhythm that he's setting, and to be able to hit the pace that she's asked for and that she's planned for and trained for in this race. And I think the other women sensibly know that would be almost suicidal to try and go with the pace at this stage in the race. So they are running with their own pacemakers and just running their own race behind, and I guess keeping an eye on what's happening up ahead just in case De Geffer has overcommitted.
Well, there are those splits, and you can see they're varying a little bit, 320 to 314. That's quite some variation for the, I don't know if that's for De Geffer, or if that's for the lead pack. It says leading women, but was that for De Geffer or the lead pack?
Well, that's back to the men, and they're still a very healthy group there, a dozen, 15 men on roughly 2:03:30 pace.
Yeah, not too much going on. I think if you're in that pack in this first 10, 15, even 20 kilometers, just to let the pace unfold in front of you, just to stay there and not overcommit too much energy, even thinking about too much, just to follow with the pace and let the race pan out a little bit before the real racing will start in the second half of this race. That's another 2:59 kilometers, so the men are a lot more consistent in their pace.
Well, we're looking forward to the first real big mark of the 10K, which should be coming up shortly.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously they're running just inside 3 minutes, so you're looking for something like, what, 29:30, 29:40 at 10K. And if it were 29:30 at 10K, well, you'd be looking at a winning time around 2:04:20, 2:04:30. I think we saw a caption come up a little while ago saying they look to be heading for a time of around 2:04:30. But negative splits are pretty common nowadays. There's those splits. Look, another 3:01 creeping in that 8th kilometre, but pretty metronomic. Good job by the pacemakers, I would say, so far.
Yeah, I think so. I think any fluctuation possibly has to do with the wind being a little bit stronger than it has been in previous years. shouldn't really have too much of an effect, certainly for the athletes further back in the pack, settled in and getting a little bit of protection from the wind from the pacemakers.
Well, as we said, it's a fair bit warmer than it was last year when Getane Molla of Ethiopia ran 2:03.34. So I think, now explain the dew point, Paul, and the significance of it. We've said it's 21 degrees Celsius, but the dew point is only 15.
Yeah, the dew point is 15, and I hope I can do a good job of explaining this, but basically the dew point is the temperature at which the air becomes saturated. So you ideally want a lower dew point to indicate a lower humidity and more comfortable racing conditions, because the higher the dew point, the harder it is for the sweat to wick away from your body. It tends to sit on the skin instead and will feel more oppressive and harder racing. So that dew point is a fair bit higher than it was last year, which should indicate that the conditions are tougher for the guys out there racing today and the women.
Well, they're approaching 10K, Pat. There it is now. And the pack going over that mat, what, now? Yes, at 29:36. And that at 10K, well, represents just inside 2:05. So they haven't really switched on just yet. They're certainly a long way off sub 2:04 or God forbid, sub 2:03 splits as yet. And the longer they go into this second quarter of the race, so to speak, almost the second quarter of the race, without really hitting the 2:55, 2:56 territory regularly with those kilometre splits, the less chance there is of them going under 2:04.
Well, Paula, there's Worknish still well away from the pack.
Yeah, and still setting a very, very good pace. You can see her focused, her eyes just focused on the road in front of her. She looks as though she's working very hard for this stage in the race.
She's right up on her toes, isn't she? She's a very toey runner. I mean, she's a lovely looking runner. She's got a wonderfully proportioned physique. So often you see world-class marathon runners on the women's side who actually aesthetically, I think, don't move that well. But when you look at De Geffer, well, she's a really lovely looking athlete. Almost, I want to say poetry in motion is a bit of a cliche, but you know, she's an athlete who ticks all the boxes too. So many of the marathon runners nowadays, Paula, and you know, you were the complete runner, great cross country, great track runner, great on the roads. But De Geffer has actually done a lot of half marathons. You know, she's gone under 68 minutes 7 times. So many of them don't even do half marathons.
This is a cracking pace now. I mean, we talked about earlier that she was on around that 2:18 pace, but she's significantly picked it up through from 7K there. The 7th kilometre, 3:14, 3:13 for the 8th kilometre, 3:10 for the 9th kilometre. And that is very, very fast running. And that's why she looks as though she's running as hard as she is. She's obviously really going after a quick time here today, feeling good at this point in the race and almost looking across to her pacemaker to chivvy him along a little bit. And you can see her cadence is very high, and that's the turnover of her leg speed, and that's helped, as you said, Tim, by the fact that she's getting the toe down very quickly onto the road surface and then lifting it fairly high, her heel up behind her there, which means a very, very quick turnover in cadence.
Well, 3:10 per kilometre. Her last kilometre was a 3:10. If she were to maintain anything like that, she'd break the world record. 3:10 is 2:13 and a half pace.
Well, we'll come to that later, but remember, course record here, 2:17.08 last year. Worknish herself did 2:17.41, so she's doing substantially better at the moment.
And 32.28 there through 10 kilometres means that she's just run a 16:06 5K for that section of the course,
and
which is a lot quicker.
The first one.
16:06 for 5K. Wow. That's about 2:14 pace. And 32.28 was her actual split. That is exactly 2:17.
Yeah, we can see the chase pack have not yet gone through 10 kilometres, so that lead has grown. substantially. There you go, 46 seconds back. They have just gone through 10 kilometers.
Wow.
We're going to have a few words from our sponsor. This is Rula Abomani, the CEO of Standard Chartered.
Well, perhaps you can start by telling me why this partnership works so successfully with Standard Chartered and indeed the marathon.
Well, you could see it's been very successful, the fact that we've been doing it for 16 years, and the number of participants have been increasing from 600 when the marathon started, and now it's just above 25,000. Now, it is in line with our behaviors and beliefs as Standard Chartered, where we participate and support communities where we operate in. And this is very much a community event where you get the people within your community, your clients that are part of your community, as well as for the staff of Standard Chartered. As every staff member has 3 days of volunteering for us, and we take this occasion where we volunteer and we participate. So we have 600 people, staff members from Standard Chartered, volunteering and participating.
It must make you incredibly proud as CEO with the amount of participation and involvement with your team.
It is. It makes us very proud because it's a flagship event at the regional level, and it's giving back to the community and making sure that there is ways to always create health and awareness, you know, for your staff, for your clients, and for your community members. I mean, as Standard Chartered, we also, marathon for us is not new. We sponsor in 7 other markets, which I've mentioned earlier, and they're very successful in these markets. And this is one way really of, it's a run for everybody. So this time it's a run for me, where everybody has a purpose for running.
Well, she said it's a run for her. That is Rula Abomani, and she's certainly living up to that because she's starting the 10K race. That's to say she is the race starter, but she is herself running in the 4K event later on. Now, Tim, we got word from the course. The 2 Mexican guys, Santana and Pacheco, went through 10K in 30:28. Now, that's going to do their Olympic chances no harm whatsoever, because that's quite a bit faster than their personal best.
Yes, they are. I mean, 2:08:30 is, they were hoping to get under 2:10. They've both run just inside 2:11. They've sort of got one foot on the plane for Tokyo for the Olympic Games for Mexico's Jose Luis Santana and Juan Pacheco, to give them their full names, 30 and 29 respectively, and actually silver and bronze medalists at the Pan Am Games in Lima in July last year respectively. So both very much world-class runners with 2:10 personal bests, but at the moment really hitting those splits well for a time just inside 2:09. So we'll try and keep you abreast of how those 2 Mexican lads are going. It's looking really good.
Well, they did say at the press conference that they're 2 of only 6 people in the whole of the Americas, North and South, that have got the qualifying times for Tokyo, because those fields are going to be restricted at the Olympics this year. Yeah,
I think, is it 80 athletes are allowed to race in Tokyo in the marathon? The top 80 come a particular date, and at the moment I think they're both just inside that top 80. But, in theory they can get shunted out. Of course, you've got to remember only 3 Kenyans are allowed to run, only 3 Ethiopians, and so on, to make up that 80. Whereas if you took the best 80 in the world, you'd have 40 Kenyans and 30 Ethiopians, and it would just be, nobody else would get a sniff.
Well, there probably are a few Kenyans and Ethiopians already for running for other countries, and we do have a former Mexican woman here, Rispa Biaku,
former Kenyan,
former Kenyan, now running for Mexico since 2016, and she's attempting to do the 2:29:30, which is just about a minute faster than her personal best. 2:29:30 that she needs to be able to qualify for Mexico for the Tokyo Olympics in August.
Well, 38 minutes on the clock. The wheelchair racers, by the way, have been out there for 43 minutes now, so they're approaching halfway in their particular race, around halfway. But these lads, side by side, very, very impressive, the speed they're moving at. You can't really appreciate it until the sun comes up, can you? And you get a better perspective from the pavement in the background, but they are motoring sub-3 for each kilometre at the moment.
Well, just briefly, we got a shot a couple of seconds ago of Andualam Belai. That's another Ethiopian. He's run 2:06, and he had a big improvement winning the Lisbon Marathon earlier this year. He was 10th here in Dubai in 2015 in only 2:09.56, so you know, four minutes off that time already.
Yeah, Belai did have a great 2019. He ran 3 marathons last year and he won them all. He won Castellón in Spain in 2:08, then he won in Riga again in 2:08 in May, and then, as you said, Pat, in Lisbon in October set that personal best of 2:06 exactly. That was in late October too, so assuming he's freshened up, he could be a real threat. Before 2019, he'd only broken 2:10 once, and then last year he broke 2:10 in each of his 3 marathons. That is some raising of the levels.
Now, there used to be a thought about 20, 30 years ago that you shouldn't really be running more than 2 marathons a year. You probably never did more than that, Paul, did you?
In a 12-month period, I think I did race 3 within a 12-month period, but not consistently back-to-back. And I think it depends how hard you're racing each of the marathons as well. I think if you look at the way that De Gefer backs up Dubai with Boston, and then it's obviously hoping to go to Tokyo and run well, that's 3 close together, but she's probably not aiming to run all of those flat out. She obviously is aiming to run the one here today flat out, but then thinking that Boston will be more of a tactical race. So a lot of these athletes will run around the marathon distance fairly regularly in training, and if they're using some of those races as training, then it makes it easier to squeeze more races into the year.
Well, we got a brief look in that aerial shot about 30 seconds ago of the world's only 7-star hotel, the Burj Al Arab, and they're coming up and down the Jumeirah Beach Road, and one of their U-turns is right outside the Burj, and that shot also did tell you that dawn is starting to break rather cloudily at the moment over Dubai.
But it was yesterday, wasn't it? Or, in fact, I think it was more of a sandstorm yesterday, really, over the city, because you looked upwards and the sky was blue, but you were looking up through a sort of haze, and visibility was dreadful yesterday. There's those confirmation of those 10K splits, 32.28, so 46 seconds. That's well over 200 meters, I think. The pack were behind De Gefer. She's still bouncing along nicely, and that caption we saw just now said her predicted time is 2:16.50. Well, that would be a course record by about 20 seconds.
And a substantial personal best by almost a minute as well. So very, very quick running. And that doesn't, if you took the predicted time from her previous 5K, sorry, I think that would be quicker again.
And that would be the 3rd fastest in history.
Well, Dexisa looking okay towards the back of the pack, though, and that is a big pack. And Paula, what would your position be if you were one of these guys? Would you like to be towards the front of the pack to see what's going on? You've got a bit of wind blowing over your skin, so there's a little bit, tiny bit more evaporation going on, or would you be towards the back, just keeping out of the racing?
I think it really depends on your mentality, on your style of racing. I always preferred to be closer to the front of the pack. If you watch someone like Mo Farah, for example, when he's racing, particularly on the track, he prefers to be right at the back, keeping an eye on the whole of the field in front of him. I'm not sure which Dexisa prefers, but it looks like at this stage either he's keeping his powder very dry and keeping an eye on the rest of the field and letting them do some early racing and settle down, or he's struggling to hang on. I think he looks fairly comfortable, so I think he's just settling and just letting the others do a bit of early racing, a little bit of yo-yoing in that field, and just let the race pan out a little bit before he commits. But it's a fairly big gap from where he's sitting there to the front of that pack.
Well, we just had a very spectacular view of the Jumeirah Beach Road. The athletes run a couple of times up and down this very, very flat and beautifully surfaced road. The runners always say it's the best tarmac they've ever seen anywhere in the world.
In the red shorts there, that's Achu Banti, or Achu Banti Desi, to give him his full name, the 24-year-old. He's a 2:06 performer, did that in Prague back in back in May. And it's his first Dubai appearance, Banti there. It's extreme left of picture. You can just see those red shorts. But his last three marathons last year. Second in Mumbai, third in Prague, and then he won in Hengshui last September in 2:08. So a really solid 2019. But going back to that issue of how many marathons you should run a year, you know, I know there are some athletes who get away with running 3 or 4 per year, Paula, but actually you look at the people who have real longevity in the sport, and the majority of them stick strictly to 2 marathons per year. I mean, Pat said that's an old way of thinking, but actually it's the very consistent way of thinking.
Yeah, well, back to the wheelchairs, Paula, and Hoog's still in the lead and over halfway now.
Yeah, he's still having a little look across there. It is Chinese athlete Sam Young, who is sitting in second place. Behind him, you can see Hoog's starting to get a little bit frustrated. I think he's done a lot of the leading, well, in fact, all of the leading that we've seen, and now trying to encourage Young to come by and share a little bit of the work.
Well, without too much success, but there it is, Zhang Yong of China. There's 2 or 3 Chinese in and half a dozen Japanese, but they haven't made the sort of inroads that we thought they might have done.
Well, spread across the road all over the place as they reach that drink station, the 15k drink station. Those athletes will get that 15k split for you very shortly, I suspect, but really important in these situations. There we are, 44:30 at 15k for the elite athletes. Really important, Paula, that you do get your drinks early in the race, and you know, some athletes let it play upon their minds a great deal, but you know, they do say in a marathon, the old adage is if you start feeling thirsty in a marathon, then you've left it too late. But for these guys, actually getting that sustenance early on is critical. Did you ever miss a drink in a significant race?
Not through my fault. I arrived to the drinks table in New York, actually, the first year I ran there, to find that my bottle wasn't there, and I was the first person to get to the table, so I know nobody took it. And less important in New York, I think more important today, when conditions, as we've talked about, are fairly humid, fairly warm out there for marathon running, certainly, and it's important to get your bottle, particularly in the first half of the race.
Now, just a quick word about the wheelchair race that we saw earlier. Zhang Yong, the Chinese, on paper, he's actually almost 20 minutes slower than Marcel Hoog, so he's certainly turning in some performance at the moment. But we're concentrating right now on Beji of yet another Ethiopian in the men's race. He's a 2:06.36 man who won in Seville in 2019. That was another big improvement from him, because prior to that he was roughly a 2:09 to 2:14 runner.
Well, he actually improved a 5-year-old personal best when he won in Seville, Pat, with that 2:06.36. Beji, he's only 23. This is his 10th marathon already, so he's one of those guys who does like to get out there and race. He raced 3 marathons in 2018. It was 6th in Barcelona, he won in Riga, and he was 8th in Frankfurt. So he's certainly learned his trade. But so often I think you see, Paula, don't you, with a lot of these young East Africans, they come out and they run 3 or 4 marathons a year in the first couple of years on the circuit. Then somebody, a good coach, a good agency gets hold of them, and almost you suddenly see their career take a slowing and a jolt, and they get back into a 2 marathons per year rhythm.
Yeah, I think I guess it's just learning about it a little bit more, and I think when there's a tradition and a history of racing a certain way, it's easy to jump into that, and we see many of the African athletes start racing over the marathon distance a lot younger as well, whereas traditionally in Europe, certainly in the UK, the rule of thumb was to move to the marathon later in your career, and it's only more recently that we've seen the likes of Callum Hawkins move to the marathon much earlier in their career, and very successfully.
Well, there's De Gefer again, while the men are on schedule for just outside 2:05. That split at 15k 44:30 is 2:05.12. Temper De Gefer here is running spectacular splits. It'll be interesting to see her her 15k split, because as you said, Paula, quite rightly, 16:06 for that second 5k segment after an opener of 16:22. Do you think that was a bit extravagant?
Well, we'll get an indication now. I think she's maintained that, if that is correct, and she has already gone through the 15 kilometers. There you go. That is a very, very quick time. Again, no wonder that the strain, I think, is starting to show on her face a little bit of confusion as she looks for her bottle, but she has safely got it there.
Well, as you can see, the sunrise is well underway, getting lighter now. But fortunately, there's quite a lot of cloud cover, so no, we're not going to get any direct sun by the looks of it.
So that was I make it a 16:04 for that third 5 kilometer split for De Geefer, and here is the chasing group approaching that 15 kilometer mark now. Incidentally, if any Swedish listeners, Hannah Lindholm also looking for the Olympic qualifier in this race of 2:29:30. Through 10 kilometers she was on 2:28:20 pace.
Those are De Geefer's kilometer splits, and Pat really consistent. You look at the last 5k, I mean 11, 13, 12, 12. You know, it's metronomic.
Now, when we go back to the men's race, we just had word from the course that Osako, the Japanese record holder, has dropped back off the pack, and he's now operating at round about 2:06:30 pace. But that's about 30 seconds behind that leading group. But as Tim said, it's not his objective to run the whole distance here. Fine view of the Burj Al Arab.
I'm just looking at the splits from Bridget Kosgei's world record in Chicago when she ran 2:14:04. She went through 15k in 47:26. That's almost a minute quicker than De Geefer is running here. So De Geefer on schedule for, I think, for around 2:16:30. Obviously 2.5 minutes, almost 2.5 minutes slower than the world record from Bridget Kosgei from Chicago back in October.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
I think it's very hard to compare women's racing times with those splits from Kosgei in Chicago. I remember chatting to Bashir Abdi after the race, and he finished, I think, 5th in the men's race in Chicago, and said that he was actually, Bridget Kosgei was running with them for the first couple of miles, so the pace that she set out was very fast.
Let's hear from some tourist runners here in Dubai.
Sometimes I run in Paris. I like to run for my health. It's a good thing, I think.
I started running in high school. I got into it because of a Terry Fox run.
I run because I like to run. It's very healthy, and it's a nice way to spend some free time.
I saw a beach called White Beach, I think, and I think it's the ideal place for running.
I enjoy running. I find it competitive, and I like to compete with myself to reach new boundaries, but I also like to compete with other runners to make sure that I always stay on top and beat them.
So not just a shopping experience, a lot of people both here living in Dubai and coming from abroad. It's quite a contrast with the first race 20 years ago, just a couple of hundred marathoners, and in the 10k maybe 500 or 600. Over all of the races today, the 21st anniversary race, we got about 30,000 people.
At 16th kilometre, 3:02. Now, you shouldn't read too much into it, I suppose, but it is the slowest kilometre of the race so far. As you can see, there's been a few 3:01s, a 2:59 at 17k, so they're still hovering around 3 minutes or just inside it as an average. But be very interesting to see if these next 3 kilometres through to 20k do start slowing up a little bit.
Yeah, and a little bit of reluctance from that second group now to commit and to stay with the pace. Basha of Bahrain, they're just starting to bridge the gap a little bit. Abeji is checking his watch, making sure what pace are we running at, because it feels like it's maybe a little bit too quick to commit to staying with the pacemakers.
Well, it's interesting that Basher is up there. I mean, he's substantially slower, which is to say, 4 or 5 minutes than some of the top men here. He incidentally was an Ethiopian until 2013, switched to Bahrain, and then comes from the same village, incidentally, as the Dibaba sisters, Bikoji, known as Running Town, Ethiopia.
And I think he is an out-and-out track runner. He was only 90th batcher there in the red at the World Cross Country in Horus in Denmark back in March. So didn't enjoy the hills there, probably enjoying this flat circuit a great deal more. Good job by these pacemakers, Kipkoech, Felix Kipkoech and Silas Kipto. Keeping it very much on schedule for something down around 2:05. Some of these characters too, I'm astonished at how small they are. Pat Banti and Abeji there, you see them in breakfast this last couple of days. They're minute characters. And when I say minute, I mean around 5'4", 5'5".
Yeah, just chatting to some of the organisers yesterday, that third name that's coming up on the screen there, so Banti Desi, most of the athletes just go by the second name, but apparently he gets very, very excited if you mention the Desi part and will start jumping around.
And there is Osako. As we said, he's dropped off the pace, and he's going to be dropping out eventually, but he's certainly not as far back as we thought he was. That's not 30 seconds behind the leaders, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, what's interesting though, Pat, is that we're 99% sure that this is a training run for Suguru Osako. He just wants to go to around 25k, the Japanese national record holder. But Paula, I would imagine that he's come here on reasonably tired legs if he's still in training for Tokyo. He hasn't eased off. He hasn't adjusted his training these last couple of weeks like the rest of these guys have for this race.
No, he won't have eased up coming into it, so he will be trying to simulate, if you like, the race situation for the final 30k, 25-30k of that. So to train fairly hard coming in and then try and hold with that pace for 30 kilometers of this race.
Well, we've switched back to Worknish, but it looked as if he is just using this as a sort of training race, dropping off the pace, and he's actually caught that group back now. So he really was sprinting there, presumably training for the Olympic race.
Yeah, he may be simulating surges within that.
I'll tell you what's interesting about De Geffer. You look at where her left hand goes across her chest. Quite different to her right hand. She's not a symmetrical runner. She's not a balanced runner. You know, Haile Gebrselassie has this same little quirk, doesn't he? His arms don't move in the same way. But her left arm movement, very different to her right arm movement.
Well, do you know why Haile did that?
Well, allegedly because he ran to school with books under his arm. Apparently that's a load of old rubbish. I don't know, but it's a wives' tale, I've been told.
Well, like his age.
Well, yeah. Take a wild guess.
There is the second pack of the women. Deradida on the far side, Kuma, Shona, Facer is still there. We were talking about the prowess on different surfaces. Deradida, of course, finished second in Aarhus in the World Cross Country Championships.
And she's a great track racer too. Really good track pedigree.
Well, as you can see, we're shortly going to be coming up to the 20k marker, and shortly after that the half marathon. So that's going to be a very good pointer to what our final time is going to be. Still a big group with the men, Tim.
Oh, it's a massive group. Yeah, I mean, it's impressive when you think they're shifting at what, around 62 and a half minute pace for the half marathon. Just how many are in there? What, maybe 20 strong, that group. Belai is in the middle of the pack there. We've talked about Anduelem Belai, the 27-year-old Ethiopian. It was 10th here in 2015. That was the last time he ran. He's come back 5 years later, hoping to improve things. But he has set a personal best, as we talked about, in Lisbon in October of 2:06. So he's 4 minutes better than he was 5 years ago. Bit of daylight always welcome too.
And without direct sunshine, here is one of the U-turns.
Interesting to see that predicted time, 2:05.19. I mean, conditions look pretty good, Paula. When we got out of our car an hour and a half or so ago and walked here to our commentary area by the start-finish area, there was a tiny bit of breeze around, but you know they're reasonably sheltered, I think, most of the time from any breeze out there. The temperature's not bad.
Yes, I think the only factor is that relatively high humidity in comparison to previous years when conditions have been very much perfect. And indeed Helmut Winter, who does a lot of the research and the stats for these races and explained all of the dew points to me, he did say that he would be very surprised to see a time under 2:05 today, given how high that dew point was. So I think these racing is reflecting that it's gradually slipping back slower. Certainly on the men's side, De Geef on the women's side, it is not really correlating with that theory at this stage. And there is Osaka now moving to the front of this group.
Spread across the road to be guided across that mat, 20k 59.28.
What sort of prediction is that going to get us to the finish in?
I'm just turning to my trusty tables here.
Well, while we do that, Tim, let's just take a look at the mass race start. As you can see, off they go. There were just a few hundred of them 20 years ago. There's thousands nowadays, and of course there is a 10k race, as I said, and there is a 4k race. This, the start of the mass marathon. They're going to be doing the whole 42.195k.
And many of them will be running in a more challenging temperature. I mean, you think that the elite have been out there now for an hour exactly. These guys are going to be running in considerably higher temperatures, especially their 4 or 5 hour athletes or slower. They'll be running through the middle of the day.
Well, it was surprisingly warm compared to last year when we came along here, as you said, Tim, at about 4:30. But I don't think the temperature is going to rise all that much. It was already about 20, 21 degrees then, but it frequently does go up to 28 even at this time of the year. But having said that, we've actually had fog here a couple of times over the last 20 years, would you believe? One year the helicopter couldn't go up, so it was just reliant on motorbikes and static cameras. But as you can see from that aerial shot, absolutely no problems today. But fortunately for those runners who, as Tim said, are going to be out here 4, 5, even 6 hours. A lot of cloud cover today, and it's not going to get outrageously hot.
It's great to see so many local Emiratis taking part in this event as well, I think across all of the events. So this race, plus the 10K and the 4K, participation has grown by 325% for the locals, and through that My City, My Race campaign backed by Dubai Holding. It's great to see the pride in Dubai's hosting of this event and in actually taking part and getting out there and contributing to it.
Well, I think everybody got the message after the first half a dozen years of the marathon. They saw even more tourists coming in. They could see the financial benefits as well as the health benefits. And as the General Secretary of the Sports Council, Saeed Harib, said that they're really concentrating on getting the Emiratis doing all sorts of sport, participating and spectating too.
Osaka checking his watch very regularly there, settled in behind the two pacemakers alongside Banti. I wonder if he maybe made a bit of an unscheduled stop, you know, and then has caught back up to the pack, because he looks very, very good at this point now.
Well, 62.42, there we go, 62.43 at the halfway, these fellas. So almost exactly on 2:05.30 pace.
I think a minute behind what was asked for, but the pacemakers have done a very good job in reassessing that pace asked for in respect to how the athletes are running around them and what they actually want once the race is underway.
Well, and you know, it's impossible to know exactly what the wind is doing in their faces, what the temperature feels like out there. You know, maybe it is a little bit warmer out there than they would have liked. You've both said, you know, you've both been sitting here for these last couple of years, which I haven't, that it's much warmer than the last 2 years.
Oh, well, we were sitting here shaking last year. It was so cool. That's the mass race getting underway.
And the numbers, well, it's funny, isn't it? Because there are approaching 30,000 people have entered all the different races this year. Last year, just under 20,000 entered. So there's been a massive increase in the overall entry for this sort of festival of running today. But the marathon itself last year had 2,400.
Well, as we said earlier, Marcel Hug is got a Chinese Zhang behind him, who on paper is 20 minutes slower, but certainly not today. And they're going to be coming in here in about sort of 15-20 minutes or so.
You half expect to see a tow bar between them, don't you? They're that close together.
Well, certainly drafting is coming into play here substantially.
Well, you could see their Hug pushing hard at the front, and Zhang actually just sitting up and relaxing in the slipstream.
Well, that's 35k, just 7.2k to go. And they've been out on the road 1 hour and, well, coming up to about an hour and 10 minutes.
So De Geffer still looking strong. That's her just gone through 20k, is it, I think?
Yeah.
And up alongside her pacemaker. That's Berhanu Hailu. Now.
Well, her half marathon time is going to be really interesting.
Isn't it just? Yes. Kosgei and her world record 66.59. Paula, do you know what your halfway split was in London back in 2003?
68.04.
Well, I've got 68.02 here.
Oh, wow.
But not bad, not bad. What was your second half then? Come on.
Work it out from that, can't you? What was it, 67.30 something?
67.23 is what I've got from one of the official reports. But yeah, it will be interesting to see if De Geffer can hold together for a strong second half. She's obviously full of confidence. She did say, didn't she, that she's come back when she's in a press conference a couple of days. She's a much different athlete mentally than she was last year. She's had a good year, and she feels very, very confident that she can go significantly quicker. And I admire her for laying it out like this. She really is putting herself, exposing herself, so to speak.
Yeah, she's taking a calculated risk, shall we say. I mean, she knows the shape that she's in, and she talked very much about how it was the confidence not only of the fast time here in Dubai that she ran, but then to back that up with the victory in Boston. And she said the victory in Boston really gave her the belief that she belonged at the top of the world scene. That pace has slipped back a little bit for that fourth 5 kilometer segment there to 16:24, which is probably more sensible running rather than signs of her really cracking and falling apart. She looks still very composed at this stage.
Well, that graphic really should say leading woman, because all of the times that you're seeing are Worknesh De Geffer's times that we're getting up on the screen.
So is that 64.56 at 20k, I make it? Does that sound about right?
And that last K, 3:19.
Yeah, so maybe slowing a little bit.
Yeah, but still a predicted race time which would bring her a new course record and a new personal best.
I wonder if she's chatting to Berhanu and actually they're communicating constantly. Paula, when you ran your 2:15, you had a couple of Kenyan fellas in front of you the whole way, a few feet away. Were you talking to them, communicating with them?
I wasn't talking to them, but I was racing them. In my head, I'd really tried to think of it more as racing against them, and in fact felt like it was kind of rid of one when I lost one pacemaker somewhere around the Isle of Dogs, and was just concentrating then on racing the other. And I think because I was very conscious of the criticism that was kind of levelled at the male pacemakers within the race, I ran alongside them for all of the race. I didn't want to run behind at any point.
You didn't really want pace makers, did you?
No, I didn't. I felt like I could race. I was in shape to run fast on my own. I think everybody's different, and I always felt like I was able to push myself as hard as I was able to push myself if I was racing with people.
They just went past a 21k marker in the background, so they should be coming up to the halfway point in about 30 or 40 meters, I reckon. And she's now outside 2:17 tempo, 3:22 that last kilometre, and there is 68:36.
Yeah, so maybe a sign that early pace was too quick, and she's having to check back and gather herself a little bit now. Still a substantial lead over the chasing pack, though.
But look at those splits. The last couple of kilometres in particular, apart from that 16th kilometre, are pretty slow compared with the rest. And there's a lot of 3:11s, 3:12s, 3:13s. Those are De Geffer splits, we hasten to add. It says leading women. It should say leading woman, really. She is a long way ahead of this pack. That's an incredibly heavily strapped knee from Bayatu. Goodness me. Tigis Bayatu, the 25-year-old. She's a 2:24 athlete. She was second in Istanbul this year. We were talking earlier, Paul, about how many athletes use half marathons, how many don't. She has never run a half marathon. Even though she's a 2:24 performer. I just find that bizarre. It's like this new generation of athletes on the track. You get 1,500-meter runners who never run 800, it seems. You get specialism so much more than, well, back in the day.
I mean, I think it's more significant on the track, certainly, because you tend to race a lot more in the build-up, certainly to those 1,500-meter championship races. In the marathon, you can just come out and race the marathon. It's not saying that they haven't run a hard half marathon or a hard tempo run in training, but just not come out and taken the time away from the training to race that. So there is that gap at now 1:29. So it's not grown much in that final or in that previous 5-kilometer split there, and maybe now we will start to see that group rather making inroads on that lead rather than that lead continuing to grow.
Well, that's going to be interesting in the second half of the race. Incidentally, just harking back to the two Mexicans that we talked about, Santana and Pacheco, they went through halfway at 64:24. Let's take a look at a couple of Emiratis or a couple of locals that are going to be running here.
It's my first proper 10K of anything, to be honest.
Well, last year during the full marathon, it was awesome. It was great. A lot of people were running.
I've really got no tactics for this. I've wanted to just go into it and just enjoy it. And so what I'm finding is not paying attention necessarily to the running of what I'm doing, is I'm just enjoying the run and hoping to see what sort of time I do.
It was only 6 months training. Every other day, we targeted 8 km.
So the idea really is to try and concentrate less on the time, focus more on the experience, and then hope that the time reflects that.
I love Jumeirah Beach, to be honest. I used to run here every morning during weekends. Life is in here, in this beach, in this facility.
Well, Marcel Hug with Zhang of China. Zhang Yong still right behind him and getting the benefit of Hug setting the pace. He's won here the last couple of years and was fully expected to win again this year. And if he stays there, he will do, but it's going to be an interesting finish, Paula.
He's setting a very, very fast pace. I'm guessing that might have been 40k that they've just gone through there. We'll get a bit of confirmation on that, hopefully, but it looks as, I mean, he's looked the whole way through this race as though he's been setting down a very, very fast pace, and probably a little bit of confusion in his mind as well every time he checks back and sees Zhang still there behind him. What more can he do to try and shake it off? Certainly there's no willingness to share the pace. Another check behind there. He knows he's approaching the finish, and he's trying to do everything that he can to shake away this chaser that's been stuck behind him the whole way.
As you can see, coming up to 1 hour and 18 minutes there. Hug this year has done 1:22.51. Zhang Yong of China has only done, let me see, 1:41.57. I mean, that's an extraordinary difference. He's going to knock 20 minutes off his best time, or certainly this year's best time.
And if you contrast the styles, as Tim mentioned earlier, you see how often Zhang Yong actually can sit up and just go upright in his chair. Marcel Hug doesn't do that, stays down, stays compact, stays streamlined, keeps that silver bullet piercing the air in front of him and working very, very hard.
Well, he's certainly got the experience. That's one of the few you know, traffic speed reduction humps that they went over. That's the only sort of hillock that you get on a course like this.
Perhaps the most significant name missing from this wheelchair field is Daniel Romanchuk, the young American. He's retained his Chicago title back in October. He was runner-up in Tokyo, but he won both London and Boston last year. He's only a youngster, and he's got a massive wingspan. That is incredibly long, powerful arms, Romanchuk. Many people saying he's the future of wheelchair racing, but when he's not around, Hug is normally the boss, but he's having it anything but his own way today, Pat.
Well, he's got 2 consecutive victories here. The wheelchair race only reintroduced in the past few years. He and his compatriot Sandra Graf, the 2 Swiss, were the winners in the last couple of years, looking for hat tricks here. Well, let's see if who can keep it going.
There again you see Zhang just sitting up and relaxing while Hug continually pumps away with those shoulders, those arms. And I can only assume Hug is not so frustrated because he's not weaving from side to side, is he? You know, you could make these slight variations across the road. He's keeping that straight line. He must know Zhang is there. I'm sure he can sense he's there. But this is ominous for Hug, perhaps, with the Chinese just tucked in so closely behind him.
And that was for the first time almost that the Chinese moved out as if to try and to come alongside Hug, and Hug took that as a little bit of the gauntlet being thrown down and managed to raise his game a little bit. I think it would maybe cost him a bit too much energy to be weaving across the road too much and trying to encourage Young to come alongside him.
Well, they've just turned into the lengthy finishing straight. I can see the finish. And well, certainly the crowds in the stands can see them. We've got a quick murmur from them as they wheeled around the corner. Well, let's see if Marcel Hug can hang on for his hat trick.
I must admit, my instinct is to wish that that Hug does get the victory. He's done all the work, you know. I've never been a huge fan of seeing somebody sit in, let somebody else do all the hard labour, and then sprint past them right at the end. I'd like to see Hug wind this up and drop the Chinese.
It is into the last couple of 100 meters, and we see the Ethiopian contingent warming up for the cheering that will happen later on when we see the finish of the main races. And from that overhead shot you can see Zhang Yong trying to move alongside. The only thing when you've sat behind the whole race is when you're then out of the slipstream alongside, you suddenly realize how much harder work it is, and Hug maybe has that superior track speed to use in these closing stages.
Well, he's certainly got the experience. Marcel Hug of Switzerland going for his 3rd consecutive victory here in Dubai. There's just about 100 and so meters left, couple of hundred maybe. Camera foreshortening a bit. And certainly Zhang is not making any efforts to pull out of that slipstream and try the sprint for victory. Oh, well, there you go. He was happy to let Hug take the victory. Let the senior partner who'd done all the work take his well-deserved hat-trick. Marcel Hug of Switzerland, 3 in a row for him. Zhang Hong, well, probably 20 minutes faster than he's wheeled himself all this year, and he looks pretty happy with that, and so he should be.
Well, he was slipstreaming the entire way. I wonder whether or not it was deceptive, and Hug was actually winding it up there and just staying that a couple of meters ahead of Zhang. all the time, and the Chinese just couldn't make an impression on him. 1:22. What was the official winning time? We'll bring that to you as soon as we can.
Well, it was probably marginally faster than Hug had already done this year, 1:22.51.
Certainly of the two now, who looks like he has worked the harder in that race.
Of course, the Paralympics in Tokyo will follow the Olympic Games. The Olympics themselves begin on July 31st, or rather the athletics at the Olympic Games begin on July 31st and last for 10 days as we go back to the men's race. Incidentally, we mentioned that, sorry, it's the women's leaders. We said that Osako had dropped off the pace. Apparently between 15 and 20k, he ran 14:28.
Which was very, very quick pace, but I don't see him in there any longer now, although he has come up through 25 kilometers.
25k, 1:14.18.
Which does tend to fit a lot more with a paced, surging training run rather than actually racing here today.
That's about 2:05.20 pace, so they're slipping a little bit with 1:14.18, but still very fast running.
Well, and given there's such a huge group, you've got to think that when that does begin to split up, that the guys who are really going to make a real attempt at victory are going to start accelerating.
I think that's a very good interpretation of what we're seeing, Pat. You know, for that group to be that big at 25k is a little unnatural, and it tells me that there's several guys in there who are having their tempo dictated by the pacemakers. Perhaps they're happy with that, but there must be, Paula, don't you think, 3 or 4 guys in there who are actually feeling pretty comfortable, having gone through halfway and what was the official halfway split? Is 62:43. I think we're going to see negative splits.
Yes, which is kind of reversing the trend from previous years, but I think we are certainly seeing a gathering within that pack now. To begin with, there was the quicker pace, and then it settled back a little bit, and then I think they're kind of watching each other and just letting the race pan out a little bit. Some still like Mosiso, they're just finding the pace a little bit too quick for them today in the shape that they've come to the race in.
Well, that's the second fastest 5k of the race, 14:50. Look at that, 14:42 they opened up with, then it settled down into the 14:50s, but 14:50 from 21 to 25k is already beginning to perhaps to show a pattern of acceleration from halfway onwards. I wonder whether or not one or two athletes have had a word with the pacemakers, although I'm not sure that Amarik and Swahili match that well, because both the pacemakers are Kenyan, but it's significant. That's a big acceleration. May only seem like a few seconds, but it's significant. And Kiptu there, glancing around. Have we lost Kip Koech?
I think we have lost Kip Koech, and I've just been told that the split to 25k for Osaka was even quicker, so at 14:18. So absolutely he was using that to surge. So either he has stepped aside in this race, or he's actually up the road ahead of this pack. I think it's probably more likely he's stepped aside.
Well, you see their predicted finishing time, 2:05.53, rather slower than we hoped for, but we seem to have a consensus that this race is going to accelerate in the second half.
Well, there's those kilometre splits. Look at that, 26th and 27th kilometres, really significantly slower than everything going on in the first 15-20k. I wonder if now that we're into this third quarter of the race, there's a little bit of almost subconscious gathering of themselves for the charge over the last 10 or 15k.
I think so, and certainly a reluctance to lead at this point, so to take on that responsibility of pushing the pace on when you know that that's going to maybe sap something out of the pace that you can finish the final 5 kilometres or so at.
I mean, the prize money for first place, $100,000, that is inevitably playing on the minds of some of them, and they're thinking, do I sacrifice myself, push on, kick away, and challenge the others, or do I play it safe? Fabulous support from the East African workers who are here in their tens of thousands, whether it's here in the UAE or in Qatar. I can remember going to the World Indoors in Qatar in Doha in 2010, and there were massive thousands of screaming Ethiopians. They do create a party.
And indeed, last year for the World Championships, created great atmosphere in the stadium for those distance events.
Well, we're going to take a brief look at Worknesh, who's still well ahead of the chasing pack in the women's race. But we're shortly going to take a look at well, we saw a couple of guest workers, if you like, who are running the 10K and the marathon. We saw them a few minutes ago. We're going to take a look at a couple of Emiratis who have switched to marathon running in recent years and get their views.
Is that a bit of a concerned look behind, I think, from Degefa, trying to look back down the road to see exactly how big the gap is back to this chasing group?
Yeah, that's shown that.
And they're also looking behind a lot.
Guten is shown in the tall lady third from right in the white vest.
And there you see why with those previous splits. So the pace of Degefa has slowed substantially, which means that this chasing group must be making inroads and significant inroads on that lead.
Yeah, those are significantly slower, aren't they? She was running 3:10s, 3:12s.
Yeah, and in
over the first half.
In that group, we have Hirpa, we have Shon, and we have Abayechu. Sorry. Not too far back to face as well at the 25-kilometer point.
Yeah, 1:21.49 at 25k for Degefa. And just checking the old charts, 1:21.49 puts her on, yeah, about 2:18 pace. She has slowed quite significantly in the last 10 or 15 minutes. I think she's going to be high 2:17s, even around 2:18 if she, that's what she's on for at the moment, but she is slowing. Big gap though. Has she built up enough of a cushion? Be really interesting to see, won't it? You know, I think you've got to remember too, while she's operating at 2:17, 2:18 tempo, a lot of the ladies behind her, while they might be a minute and more behind, they're operating near their limit, 2:22, 2:23 pace, so they might not be able to catch her.
Well, this is interesting also in the men's race. We appear to have lost the pacemakers, and these guys now look as if they're jogging. And the debutante, Kiptanui, is now in the lead. I don't know if that's slightly reluctantly.
I think he spent much of the earlier race sitting right behind the two pacemakers, so inevitable that when they step aside, he's going to find himself at the front, but he doesn't look too reluctant to be there. And I think, as we've talked about, the wind isn't hugely significant out there today. There's a lot of looking around at Safer there, checking there. These guys will be looking to see, and now we see some tripping further back as well, which is inevitable when the pack is that big and starts to slow, and there is that reluctance for anybody to take the lead. And finally, Getachew is like, I've had enough now. I'm going to put my foot down and start asking some questions.
About to say, I think what they're going to be doing is just waiting for a moment like this when somebody takes off, and then the race will really begin in the men's event. In the women's, of course, it's a case of has Degefa gone off too quickly, and is she going to get caught?
Well, that is a real throwing down of the gauntlet, isn't it, from Getachew, Limani Getachew, the 29-year-old.
Well, now we're going to take a look at a couple of Emirati brothers who have found marathon running.
Was second place last year in UAE category, so I'm targeting as well this year. I'm looking for my own record, so I'm targeting like around 240, so I hope I will get it. So this will be a great achievement, which it was my target was for this year, sub 245, and I got it in Valencia in November, so I was happy with that. So I will take the risk on Friday. Let me see what will happen. And we are running as a team, like usually. and I'm running since 2008. I was almost 108 kg. I used to play rugby at the 7th, and then I noticed myself I gained weight, so I started running, and I never knew that I will join a marathon in my life. I started with 3:30 and now 2:45 PB.
Well, you've got to start somewhere. He said he was 108 kilograms, and well, he's not quite half that weight, but he certainly lost a lot. And 240 is is pretty good.
He's pretty much halved his time, isn't he? He's working down towards that with some more improvements still to come. Now, De Gever makes that hairpin turn, and she'll be able to, as she moves back up the road, see the chasing pack coming down, and they will also be able to see that they are closing that gap back towards her. So how much has she overcommitted in that first half of this race?
Well, she's at 27k. She's got, what, 15 kilometers to go. She's moving well again there now. Of course, a bit of psychology may be coming into it, Paul. If you know you're going to pass the others, they're going to go to look at you. You pump your chest out, you get up on your toes more and push it harder for 30 seconds as you go past them.
Yeah, you make it look good. I'm not sure she noticed them on the other side of the road, but her pacer running alongside us certainly did, and equally so for this chasing group here, and they will be getting that information, and they will also be able to see on these long straight shots, they will be able to see her ahead of them, and that psychologically is a huge bonus. I think when you see that you're gaining ground on a leader who has set out at such a fast pace, that gives you more energy to be able to commit more to the chase.
Well, and the chase is certainly on in the men's race now. Still a lot of jockeying for positions, and there's still a substantial group there, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, there were 23, 24 of them at halfway, pretty much in a bunch at 62.43. I think they did run a pretty relaxed second quarter in this race, and now with the size of this pack, they've fallen into that trap which is always going to be a danger of watching each other too much, I think, because they are not motoring now. There's nobody running aggressively. Look at 8 or 10 across. That's like a Sunday morning training run now, almost passing drinks around and all looking pretty relaxed. There's nobody really attacking it. And of course, Paul, drink stations quite often present an opportunity to put in a surge.
They do. Often if you get it right, and if you're able to locate your drink with minimum energy expenditure and then push on from that, it's a good place to get a substantial break or a jump on the rest of the field. And just look at those splits there to 30 kilometers, 15:22, so a substantial slowing of the pace. And if there was anybody in there who really felt like they were feeling great out there today, to see that someone like Solomon Dexisa, one of the pre-race favorites, or the pre-race favorite, is really struggling to hang on to the back of that pack, if you were able to have it within you to really inject a little bit of pace into the race at this point, you could really blow this race wide open and put some significant hard work into a victory at this point in the race.
Well, 1:29.40, that 30k split equates to around 2:06, almost exactly 2:06. So it has slowed pretty significantly. There you go, predicted time 2:06.06. We agree on that one. 2:58. I'm not surprised after those previous few kilometers, look way outside 3 minutes.
Well, a bit of information on the women's race from back down the course. We've talked about the women here who are looking for an Olympic qualifying. Rispa Biaki, the Kenyan Mexican, she's currentely on 2:26.50 pace, which would be extraordinary. 2:30.49 is her current best. Hannah Lindholm, the 40-year-old Swede, she's lost a bit of time. She's currently on 2:30.02 pace, so she just needs to pick it up if she wants to get under that 2:29.30 Olympic qualifying time.
Well, Lindholm ran in Hamburg in April, then she ran in Stockholm in June, and then she ran in Frankfurt in October. So she's running her 4th marathon in the space of 9 months, which by anybody's standards is pushing it. And at the age of 40, maybe she's going to the well one time too many.
Well, we had a quick look at Worknesh, the women's leader, just now. Has she lost her pacemaker, Paula, by the looks of it? She looked to be running solo up in front there. This, again, is the chasers.
Well, that certainly won't help her much at all. These athletes do all have their pacemakers alongside them, which will help them, and you can see them settling in behind that and taking full advantage of the pacemakers.
And of course her predicted time now, 2:18:42, is exactly 61 seconds slower than what she ran last year.
However, that 28th kilometre looked significantly quicker than previous. Gosh, you have to go back to the 17th kilometre, so it's the fastest kilometre for 11k that she's just put in. I wonder if
maybe
she realised she was wilting a bit, but you're right, Paula, the pacemaker's gone.
Maybe she instructed him to go, but maybe she felt like he was slowing her down, that she'd maybe switched off into running alongside him, and that may be why the pace has picked up. Certainly she looks more comfortable now than she did in previous shots.
More frisky, I would call it. A little bit more bounce there, a little bit more drive. I think she relaxed for quite a few kilometres, and a 3:13, that 28th kilometre, will be very interesting what she clocks for these next couple of Ks.
Incidentally, that's what we haven't really talked about so far, but we'd be remiss not to mention at some point she is of course racing in Adidas shoes, and this pack here fairly significantly decked out in the Vaporflies. And one of the biggest advantages, I think, from the Vaporfly, as we see now, is that gap from Dexisa.
Yeah, he's off the back of that group.
He's not too far off the back though, but certainly not where he would want to be.
And he doesn't look
in that race,
does he? Now that you talked about the shoes, Paul, this is an opportunity for you to give us an explanation. What exactly is different about the new shoes on the market now that appear to be big favourites and are producing really fast times for a lot of people?
Well, I think there's been an evolution in the technology of racing shoes, and significantly with the Vaporfly, what they maybe did was get their marketing spot on as well. And so now I do believe that, as well as the carbon fiber plate and the Zoom X foam, which is for me the biggest factor, is that it saves your legs. So in the marathon, when you're getting to this 31 kilometer mark in the race, your legs do not feel as dead, and that was part of the skill of racing a marathon, was to be able to handle that fatigue in your legs and still be able to close the race well. Now they're not experiencing that fatigue, so they're able to feel a lot fresher into the final 10 kilometers of the race. I do believe that there's also a placebo effect now, that there's so much publicity around the fact that these shoes make you run faster that people almost put them on and believe they're going to run faster, and so that has an impact too.
Is it the foam that's doing that? Or is it the plate?
I think it's a combination, but it's the foam that's saving the legs certainly and reducing the fatigue. What the carbon fiber plate does is increase the efficiency a little bit in the toe off, so in the impacted toe off of each stride and each foot strike.
Well, as we see the men's race breaking up slightly, very quickly, Tim, you're not a big fan of the new shoes.
No, I'm not. I've got nothing against any particular brand. I just think it's very sad that the technology has been allowed to creep in and advance to the point where it's adjusting the way people are running and the times they're producing. I know Paula mentioned the placebo thing. We will agree to disagree on that, because I know what placebo means, but I mean, thousands and thousands of club runners, national standard runners and international runners are producing times they could only ever have dreamed of a few months back, and I don't believe that's psychological. I think it has adjusted things, and there is talk of it now, there being significant evidence. I was seeing a graph somebody pulled together last night from big numbers of data that is helping elite athletes to the tune of 1 minute 45 seconds, and that means that it's helping club runners around 2.5 minutes over the full marathon distance. So it's controversial, and the controversy will rage and rage, but I'd like to see a rule brought in limiting it.
Well, Dexisa, the pre-race favourite, I think he's now off the back of that group. Is he not, Paula? Did you spot him?
Yeah, he's still... the string's not broken yet, but it's stretching. You can just see in the white vest there. He's trailing back as we watch.
Very quickly, Sandra Graf, the Swiss, like her colleague Marcel Hug has come through and won yet again the wheelchair race here in Dubai. So repeat victories for the two Swiss wheelers. And she was well out alone. Sandra Graf, the winner there, will get her time up hopefully.
I was going to say that is what you call glorious isolation, isn't it? Loneliness of the long-distance wheelchair racer. That nobody in sight behind Graf.
And indeed been on her own for much of this race. Did of course get bronze in the marathon 2008 and 2012 at the Paralympic Games.
And there's Hug beside her, who has obviously tidied himself up a bit since his victory. And a guy who we did say, Paula, was mouthing that he was going to be looked fairly confident, is actually taking it on.
Yeah, finally he's moved to the front and looks as though he's starting to push the pace on now and certainly breaking up that pack. You can see athletes one by one dropping away from the back of the pack.
Well, we're talking about 22-year-old Saifa Toura of Ethiopia. 2:04.44 in Dubai 2018. Now, he was only 7th with that time, but at least he's had the experience of knowing what the course is like. He won Shanghai and Milan that same year. Now, his 3 other marathons were in the 2:08, 2:09 range, but he's comfortably inside that, Tim, by the looks of it at the moment, even though that pace has slowed a lot.
Well, he looks comfortable, doesn't he? Yeah, he looks really comfortable there. I mean, you're right, Pat, you know, 7th in Dubai back in 2018, 2 years ago, in that personal best of 2:04, but a couple of wins in the rest of 2018 in Milan and Shanghai, and then he didn't finish Tokyo in 2019, and that was his 4th marathon in 14 months, so I think he went to the well too often. 2:52 that last kilometre. Look, he really has kicked in there. It was slowing dramatically. We'd had a 3:01 the 31st kilometre, so 2:52. I mean, the 29th kilometre was a 3:05, so 7 seconds acceleration in 1 kilometre. Now that is very significant, and it's beginning to take its toll. There's a Safer dropping away. He's a 2:06 performer too.
Yeah, and that type of surging and change in pace there will do damage to these athletes at this point in the race. As we've talked about, they are already running on tired legs, and then to have that surging, dropping back a pace and then picking up again, it's very hard to respond to. It's almost easier to react to a sustained raising of the pace rather than a sudden injection of pace like that.
Well, I mean, 21 seconds difference between 32 and 33k, so that's going to lose a couple of people as it has. Here's some of the Ethiopian guest workers. Of course, only a hop across the Arabian Sea for both Ethiopians and Kenyans. That's why this is such a popular race, with both of those East African nations who've really dominated distance running over the last 30 or 40 years.
And they are seeing themselves on the big screen as well, and reacting not only to the fact that we're seeing an Ethiopian leader running well at the front of this race, but also the fact that they're seeing themselves there.
Well, they are enjoying their Friday morning out, aren't they? They are part of the backbone of the administration of this country. Speaking of backbones, Degefa here showing quite a strong spine as well. She's really upped her tempo. There's no doubt about that over these last 15 minutes or so. Interesting, isn't it, that she's moving more freely now, Paul, and the pacemaker's gone. And you see that sometimes on track and road racing, where somebody's behind a pacemaker and they're kind of mentally and physically restrained. And it's almost like the leash has been taken off now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to talk to her after the race, because it looked for me like she certainly went through a very significant bad patch in that race between 20k and 30k really, and then has really just started to pick it up in the last 3 or 4 kilometres, and now looking as good as she did in the early stages of the race.
It'll be interesting to see what the gap is back to the leading group, but Worknish Degefa, after that rough patch, as Paula said, looks to be substantially better now. And in fact, they just even looking at those two groups, they appear to be jogging in contrast.
Yeah, the gap has closed down to 1:04, but not a lot made up now, and they definitely look as though they're shuffling. You can see the bounce and the cadence of those athletes is nowhere near that of De Geefer.
Well, she's on schedule for something around 2:18:20, something like that. You know, we're talking as though we should be disappointed with that sort of time. That's still fabulous running, a long way under 2:20. That's still a relatively small club, the number of ladies ever who have run under 2 minutes 20. So if De Geefer does go on here to dominate and run under 2:19, that is something that should be praised. We've seen so many different leaders, haven't we, over the last few minutes? That's Adugna now hitting the front in this men's race. There's a real reluctance by anybody to get the bull by the horns and start wrestling with this race over the final few kilometres. I mean, 1:43 on the clock. We're predicting 2:06, so 23 minutes to go. So they've got, what, about 7-8K to come?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a slipping of that pace, a slipping of the predicted time, and a gathering amongst these athletes. Every so often somebody decides to test out the others a little bit, but I don't think it's a sustained effort for victory at this point. I think it is just seeing and trying to gauge what the others have left in the tank and who are the significant contenders in that pack that it will come down to in the last couple of kilometres maybe now.
And it's interesting to see that the debutant Kiptanui was slightly onto one side, as if he wanted to run his own race. He's back in the pack now. 58:42 half marathon, a really rapid time, but he's still looking very, very good on his marathon debut.
Adugna is there as well. Olika Adugna, the 20-year-old, he's making his debut, the Ethiopian. Just looking, I mean, he's run 61:43 for a half. That was in Paris in 2018. He was a pretty useful junior. He was 5th in the World Junior Championships, 10,000 at Dugna. But now he's dropped back into the pack. I think there he is in the green to the left of picture. He's only 20 years old.
Well, Tim, you were talking about half marathoners and the value of running fast half marathons. Tura, of course, is a 59:17 half marathon runner, and that's pretty rapid.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, to an extent, if these guys who are quick over half marathon, and you know, debutants like Eric Kiptanui, they play their cards right these next 5K. They could be a real threat because they've got the speed, and this is becoming a bit of a cat and mouse affair this second half. It's slowed so much. You know, we were hoping one athlete was predicting, was it Tura was predicting sub 2:03, then we were talking about the 2:04s, then the 2:05s. Now we're looking at a likely 2:06 finish. 1:44.48 at 35K, by the way, is it's about 2:06.10, 2:06.20, that sort of region.
It's almost like they're looking for a leader there, and each time they're looking to Tura, he takes it on, he pushes it on a little bit, but he's not really made any significant break as of yet.
Just briefly to go back to the shoe issue, I mean, do you think there's any likelihood that the shoes might yet be banned by the IAAF?
Well, I know that there is a working group looking at it, what they're going to rule on. I think Tim's right. I think we may see some kind of regulation come in, and we were talking earlier, weren't we, about the fact that there used to be very strict regulations for shoes, particularly on the track. There used to be a regulation for the exact number of spikes that you could have, and then they did away with that completely, and we saw spikes, the brush spike, turn up with lots of different spikes in it, and then they had to go back to the regulations there. I think there does need to be some kind of regulation. Other than that, the shoe just has to be widely available for all.
Well, you mentioned the brush spike. I mean, that was interesting. That was back in 1968. I think when John Carlos set a world 200 meters record, there were 18 tiny spikes, incidentally, just to explain what a brush spike was back then. And it was permitted in the US Championships. Carlos ran a world record, and then suddenly it was banned retrospectively. There were 18 spikes instead of the regulation sort of 6 or 7. There was also a case of a built-up high jump shoe. So there's been quite a history of this in world athletics over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And Yuri Stepanov of Russia set a world, the Soviet Union back then, set a world record with it. Now that too was banned retrospectively. Of course, the big question is that if this shoe is banned retrospectively, you're still the marathon world record holder.
But I think it would be very, very harsh to do that, given the number of performances.
I think that's very generous of you, Paul. I'll stop you there, because I think, you know, your world record was smashed in Chicago by somebody wearing these shoes, and I hope that retrospectively that world record, it's taking a very long time for it to be ratified. That's what one or two people have pointed out to me. Chicago was months ago, and it's still not been ratified. That performance by Bridget Kosgei.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very hard for me to comment on, because
it is. I'll stop. Quit while you're ahead.
You'd have to asterisk it.
Well, of course, you were there, and I thought you dealt with that very, very well. I mean, what was that like when you're watching somebody actually obliterating what was a really fantastic world record, your 2:15.25 from back in London 2002?
I think in the beginning I never really would have imagined that it would last that long, and the longer that it did last, people kept saying to me it was going to last for a very, very long time, and I was thinking, well, there wasn't really that much more special about me than anybody else, and if anybody else has that level of talent and working hard, or a bit more, then for sure it's going to get beaten at some point. And I think watching in the early stages, I was maybe a little bit hopeful that she overcooked it in the first couple of miles. But
well, as many women had done in the past. I mean, Mary Kaitani set out at a furious pace in London a few years back, and then just really blew up.
Yeah, and I think that is maybe the significant factor that we're talking about, how the racing has been changed, because maybe now you can afford to go out very, very fast and not pay for that in the closing stages, whereas the old rule of marathon running was you had to get your pace right, because if you did it wrong in the first half, you were not going to survive the race.
Just for the record, Tim, before we go back to the men here, Bridget Kosgei 2:14.04 in Chicago, so that is the pending new world record, yet to be ratified, incidentally, by the IAAF.
Just watching this, these pictures unfold here, Pat, as these guys have been on the road now for almost 1 hour 50 minutes, and there's real reluctance. I mean, nobody wants to take the lead. I think we've seen 4 or 5 different leaders over the last couple of kilometers. Yersi there now hitting the front. Besha Yersi is a 2:08 performer. That was in Chuncheon back in October. That is his personal best. He was 6th in Abu Dhabi back in 2018 when the course was 100 meters or so short. But he's not one of the big names expected to have really featured here, yet there he is. And that to me underlines how they really haven't pushed on and tested the weaker points in this pack through this second half of the race. It's allowed athletes of the caliber of Yersi, who shouldn't really be living with the guys who have run 4 minutes quicker like Tura, it's allowed them to remain there and be a threat.
And there was almost a bit of disbelief, wasn't there? He was checking at his watch to see, am I really running this pace? And why isn't there anybody else pushing on the pace around me? But already they've put Peter Dexiso, who's back 90 seconds down the road, even though there hasn't yet been that significant push that you have to think it is going to be coming in the next couple of kilometers now.
So Solomon Dixis, Paul was talking about, he was the marginal pre-race favourite, the 2:04.40 man. As Paul has said, he's a minute and a half off the pace now and can be completely discounted, given that there is still what is essentially a huge group at this stage of the latter stages of a marathon.
Well, I'm tempted to say, do not adjust your set. This is not the Ethiopian Marathon Championships, because it certainly looks like it when you see that pack and all the names in there. I mean, Abeje, as they said, Abeje, he's a 2:06 performer with his win in Seville back in February. He ran 2 marathons last year. Banti now hitting the front. Banti, who we talked about earlier. Banti Desi, Aiju Banti Desi, his first run in Dubai. It's 3 or 4 abreast. I don't think the wind is a factor. I don't think the temperature is particularly a factor. This is racing, and I like this. I mean, I think it's great that you've actually got this sort of cat and mouse ducking and diving going on. They're all wondering and very nervous about when to make their move. Nobody has hit the front and really committed and tried to pull apart this pack and get away. I would like to have seen that as well, but actually this is great racing.
Yeah, it is great racing, but I would disagree. I would say that it is the conditions that have caused the race to take first seat, prominent seat here, and make it more about the racing, because they have found that it is just a little bit too tough to really hammer out those fast times here today, so they've settled down into racing. But many of these guys have not come here expecting this. They've come here expecting almost a time trial, expecting to have to run fast and not think about race tactics. And now it's interesting looking at their faces and the calculations that must be going on behind the eyes there now as to what is my best bet to try and win this race tactically now from here. There are guys in that pack who would not have expected to be in the lead group at this stage in the race.
Well, as you can see, it's picked up a little predicted race finish time, 2:06:25. We've had some fantastic finishes over the last 20 years here in Dubai, particularly thinking about 2012. That was one of the days that was pretty misty, but we had 5 guys in the finish photograph, and it was a very tight photograph. Aile Abshiro, a debutant, won in 2:04 flat, and he's really never run any better since then. But those 4 guys behind him all came in within a handful of seconds. At the moment, it looks as if we're going to get a similar type of finish.
Well, we've had Yersi in the lead, we've had Abeja in the lead, we've had Nafu in the lead, we've had so many of these fellas who have hit the front for just 200 or 300 meters. Couldn't be more of a contrast, really, with the way this ladies' race has unfolded in terms of the likely winner.
And she looks pretty good now, Paula.
She does. As we said, I think she went through a definite rough patch in the middle of that race, and then dropped her pace again and was able to pick up and look good. And now, yeah, a little bit of a grimace there, but that's probably inevitable at this stage in the race. And you can see her predicted time is slipping a little bit, but she's staying fairly consistent now around about that 3:18, 3:20 kilometre pace, a little bit quicker through the 33rd kilometre. And just for calculations and relevance, 3:20 is round about 2:20 pace. So as long as she's knocking them off below that, she's staying below 2:20 pace, which is why we're seeing that yo-yo in the predictions somewhere in the 2:18s, which is very, very good running.
So first in her debut here, 2017, Worknesh. 4th in 2018, 2nd last year, 2:17:41. She looks as if she's on for a repeat victory here after a 3-year gap in something round about 2:20, which is still fantastic running.
How many in that pack now? About 12, 13 of them. It has whittled down gradually over this second half of the race, but
and just a quick word, Tim, about a couple of the Mexican guys that are looking for a faster time than they've got already. They've slipped slightly in the pace, Santana and Pacheco. They're actually now about half a minute inside their bests, which are 2:10:52 and 2:10:54 consecutively.
Okay, through the 35 kilometres, she's safely got her 35 kilometre drink there. She's not really got too much difficulty in locating hers, has she? Not anybody around her to cause her any problems. And we get the split there. So it picked up a little bit. The slowest one was between 20 and 25 kilometres, and since then she's been gradually raising the pace, and certainly enough to, I think, maintain her lead on the other women. And each time we go back to them, for me, her cadence, her turnover looks more comfortable and looks quicker than that chasing group. So I think she's negotiated that rough patch, maybe paid a little bit for a little bit of over exuberance in that first 15 kilometres, but now settled into a rhythm and running what's going to be probably the second fastest time of her career.
Well, excellent. I mean, at this stage of the race last year, she was chasing Ruth Chepngetich of Kenya, who ended up with the 4th fastest women's time in history. Worknesh herself did the 6th fastest of all time, but it looks as now that she's really re-established that minute or so gap between the chasing group and herself, and should really be on the way to victory. But Tim, we've still got a dozen guys here in the men's race with not very far to go.
Well, I was going to say 1:57 on the clock. We've got about 9 minutes of racing to come, and this is almost becoming like a track race, isn't this? This is the gathering before the storm, so to speak. Winding it up. I mean, do you take it on? Do you have the confidence in your sprint finish? We've had plenty of mass finishes here in Dubai before, but this, we could have 10 guys over the last couple of hundred at this rate.
Well, they're clearly been told, you can hear it being shouted out to them, 3 to go. Some of them may not have realised that. Some of them have not listened in the technical meeting either, because every so often you see a glimpse of the cyclist, not the motorcyclist, but the cyclist riding the bike here. In Dubai, there isn't a blue line on the road. You may have noticed that. So it's actually the cyclist who is showing them the shortest line. Now, he's on the other side of the road from where this pack is. So at the moment, they're running slightly longer as well. I don't think it's really significant because they're racing each other. But just having that awareness, that mental awareness to be switched on to running the shortest line could be significant now, given that they are going to be racing, and it's going to be really coming down to a couple of kilometre race or pick up at the end of this.
And Kip Tanui is still in there, and for the record, a 58.42 half marathoner and a 3:37 1500 metres run at him, so he's got the credentials for a fast finish, shall we say. But is he going to be faster than, say, somebody like Tura, who is looking very comfortable, one of the bigger Ethiopians, just behind the leader? And he was equally confident prior to the race, thinking he could run 2 or 3 or faster.
Well, many knowledgeable sages of marathon running say that, you know, trackability and sprint speed is not a feature when it comes to the end of a marathon, because you've got 2 hours plus of hard running in your legs, and it's different physiology. But I think the way that these guys have been running this last few kilometers, it looks so restrained. I think they're running within themselves. I think is that the 40k mat they've just gone over? And maybe not. But I think that there are 1 or 2 of them who really will be gathering themselves mentally, screwing up their courage, so to speak, as you say, to prepare for that sprint. But what, it's still 4 or 5 across. Paula, you think the weather's been a feature? None of them seem to be sweating up particularly. I don't think they're suffering from the heat and humidity, do you?
I don't think they look as though they're suffering, but that's because the pace is slower. I think had they carried on trying to push on at 2:4 pace, then we would have seen that it would be more of a factor. I do find it slightly ironic that we're talking about how slow the race is, and it's still 2:6 pace, which is quick. And I think you're absolutely right, Tim. Finishing pace and finishing speed in a marathon is very different to finishing speed on the track. In a marathon, it's more about how well you're able to gather your legs, to raise the pace and to increase the stride length and cadence at the end, rather than a flat-out sprint as we would see in a race on the track. And it's a different skill, but it's a skill that these men will have practiced in training a lot and will indeed have used in half marathons as well.
Well, you were talking about 2:06 seeming to be a slow time nowadays. Of course, less than 20 years ago, that would have been the world record. Dozens and dozens of people, of course, dozens of men under 2:6 nowadays. Well, exemplified by a lot of the guys in this field. But who is going to turn out the winner? There's still, what, 10 dozen men in that lead group.
Well, that split at 40k, 2 hours and 3 seconds, equates to about 2:06.30. So I don't think we're going to see a sub 2:06 clocking. It doesn't matter. The times sort of become irrelevant when you've got a pack this big with this late into the race. We should be focusing upon the racing. And look how tightly they're bunched there. You could throw a big blanket over that group to drop in yet another cliche. Tura hits the front again. Abeja has paid a lot of attention. He's been the top 2 or 3 for this last 20 minutes or so. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's somebody towards the back there who's just keeping their powder dry, not really featuring, watching everything that's going on. Kip Tanui looks like he's almost jogging to me there in that white and orange.
And he's been at the back of that group for most of the time. Now, a quick word about De Geffer, incidentally. I mean, Paul has mentioned how much better she's looking at this stage of the race than she was in the mid stages. She's actually now increased her lead to 1.5 minutes, so there doesn't seem to be any question about who's going to be the women's winner here today, Paul.
No, mind you, there is a huge question for the men's, and a very exciting race panning out. Tura looked as though he was putting a little bit of a surge in, then checked across to see the effect that it had, moved across to the other side of the road in preparation for that left-hand turn that they will be making fairly soon now into the finishing straight. And the others just starting to gather. Banty still looking very, very good and very sprightly at the front there. And I think Kip Tanui looking dangerous, hovering. It is a question of how much is left, though, for these men and how much they can muster in this final kilometre.
Well, as we said, we've had some fantastic finishes here in Dubai, but we've never had anything like this. 10-12 guys close to the last kilometre of this race. Remember, 42.195 kilometres, and we're coming up to 41 very, very shortly. There's the finishing straight. They're going to be making, you can just see the Burj in the left-hand corner, going to be making the left-hand turn into a 400 or 500 metres finishing straight, and what a finish we're going to have.
Yeah, and 3:01 for that 41st kilometre, so still no pickup in the pace of that. You can see the concentration on all of their faces. Now they're pretty much spread out across the road to be able to give themselves a good shot at that. Kiptanui still sitting towards the back of that pack though.
Well, we've got a lot of photographers here, but I wonder if we're going to need a photo finish. Unheralded in Dubai, 10 guys with less than, well, just over a kilometre to go. There is the Burj Al Arab providing a spectacular background for the finishing straight here. It's the 21st anniversary of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon, and we've probably got the best race finish in the history.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting when they make that turn into the straight. There is about 500 metres or so left of the race, and here they come into that turn now. Now Kiptanui is starting to move to the front, and Banti for the first time relinquishing that place towards the front.
Well, the Kiptanui, the debutant, the former 3:37 1500 metres runner, gave up the sport for half a dozen years. And here he's looking very good indeed. He's only got a couple of metres. That's not decisive yet, but he's really showing his intent.
But he's got real confidence here, hasn't he, Pat? I mean, it looks like he's been biding his time. I think he's judged this really well so far. It's not a done deal, but his confidence is growing all the time, and must have been over this last half hour, Paula, when he's probably delighted that nobody was pushing it hard from a long way out.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you make the move here, you have to make that move with confidence and with a huge amount of strength, and you have to get it right. If you go a little bit too soon, you will overcook it, and you will pay for that here, because you can see just how quickly they are moving now. And I'd like to have a clock on the last 400 metres of this.
Well, they're really jockeying for position now. Kiptanui in second place at the moment, but he's making yet another surge. What a finish we've got here.
Well, the last 8 races have been won by Ethiopians. Indeed, Dubai's been won 13 times by Ethiopians, 7 times by Kenyans. But this is pretty much what we expected, isn't it, over this last half hour? Nobody was committing hard.
Oh, and it looks as if we've got the most decisive move so far. And it's going to be yet another Ethiopian victory.
And it's Adugna who's kicked hard around that turn, managed to get a little bit of a jump on Kiptanui, who tried to respond but wasn't able to respond, and now he's working very hard. A little look behind, but he can't believe how easy it's been in the end.
Well, he's another debutant, so Kiptanui and Adugna, 2 debutants in first and second. Pat, this is astonishing. He's a 61:43 half marathon runner. He's actually nowhere near on paper the class of those men behind him.
But checking his watch just to make sure, he needn't bother with that. There's a big clock right at the, well, yet again. He made a decisive move after Kiptanui had really gone for it. So 2 debutants. We already had this race won by a debutant in 2012. And there he goes. Adugna crosses the line. 2:06.15, followed by Kiptanui. How about that? Well, first timers all the way here.
And he's only 20 years old. That is some run. $100,000, 20 years old, 2:06.16. That is not a bad debut. Unofficially 2:06.16. And did Kiptanui nab second place? Did he hang on?
He did indeed. And we'll give you the third placer.
Abeji, I think, got third place.
So the Ethiopian win streak continues here in the 21st anniversary race of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. Debutant Adugna. And notice his third name, incidentally, Bikila, harks back to probably still the most famous Ethiopian marathon runner in history. Twice winner of the Olympic title back in 1960-64, Abibi Bikila.
Boy, oh boy. Well, I'll tell you what, it makes me think that the guys with marathon running experience, marathon running strength, and who mentally should have been superior through the second half of the race, didn't use those advantages. You know, they've allowed it to become a bit of a lottery. And for two debutants to be first and second in a race with this heritage, this richness in the past, you think Haile Gebrselassie won it 3 times, is very unusual indeed.
Yes, it is, but I think the style of the race today really played into the hands almost of the debutants. I think it's very hard to come in immediately into a 2:04 race and to be able to know your body well enough to judge your effort to perfection and run that kind of time. I think today they were able to run with a pack and to gaining confidence throughout the race, and then when you leave it as late as that, you are playing into the hands of guys with quick track speed and quick half marathon speed.
Well, there's an example of Abate, 2:06 guy, trailing in here, well outside his personal best.
Yeah, and he's incredibly consistent. He's run 4 marathons. His average is 2:07.05 from his 4 marathons, Abate, and he's not had a good day at the races. But the number of them who have come through, Pat, in around 2:06, 2:07 is astonishing.
Well, Tim's mentioned the prize money a couple of times. $100,000 for both men's and women's winners, and about $1 million prize money overall.
I've just been passed a stat there that we had 11 men under 2:07. That's unprecedented, and Dubai has just broken its own record from 2012 when there were 10 sub-2:07 performances.
Well, that's the measure of the speed of the course, and here is what is almost certainly the women's race winner, Paula. First in 2017, 4th in 2018, set a personal best, well, as she had done every year since then, of 2:17.41 last year. And here she is, repeat victory, Werknesch de Geffer.
Yeah, and still looking reasonably comfortable, isn't she? Of course, on that progression, she's taken a step back time-wise this year, but she has had a very dominant race and a significant victory for her, and it will, of course, be her second fastest time of all time.
And won the Chicago Marathon earlier this year.
She is slowing a little bit now, 3:26s for those last ones. Another worried look behind her. I mean, the last stat that we had, she had a 90-second lead on the chase group. You can see why she's worried, but I think the others behind her are also feeling the strain somewhat. This is Shona, who is in second place, I guess, at this point, and you can see she looks very, very tired, but she has managed to forge somewhat of a gap on the group that she was running with, which did include Hirpa.
Apologies, I got my American marathon cities wrong. Werknesch, of course, won the Boston Marathon. It was the world record by Bridget Cosgrave that's in Chicago.
So it'd be interesting if we could get some idea of the gap. When they get through 40 kilometers, we should be able to see that, but certainly from that long shot before, I couldn't see Shona down the road behind De Geffer. I could see the lead car, which of course Shona will be able to see if she looks up ahead, but being able to see what you need to do and being able to do it are two very different things at this point in the marathon.
And those two contrasting pictures we had there of Shona the chaser and Werknesch the leader just showed the different cadence of the two runners.
That has been like that throughout the race, though, so maybe a little bit deceptive. De Geffer's actually quite a short runner, and so she needs to have a quicker cadence and a little bit more bounce to be able to cover the ground as well as she does do. Certainly those splits tell a story of a bad patch and then a significant recovery, and now starting to feel the strain towards the end of this race.
So just over a couple of kilometers to run for Werknesch de Geffer for what will be a repeat victory of her debut victory here in 2017. And as Paula says, she's improved her time each successive year until now, but she's not going to be complaining about that with a 6-figure sum again in the bank.
No, I think she knows this course very well as well. I think that is a huge help, particularly when you're as fatigued as she is now at this point in the race, having gone out as quickly as she did in the first stage, in the first 15 kilometers of this. That's 2:12, 15 through 40 kilometers, and she knows now this final 2 kilometers very, very well, and that will help her to stay focused and to just keep moving forward and is not worried too much about what's chasing behind. Now we see Shona, how close is she to the 40 kilometer mark.
So even on a relatively straightforward, simple course like this, it's still an advantage to have run the race before, you think?
I think it's an advantage to certainly know the closing couple of kilometers of a race very, very well. If I was going to race a race for the first time, I would make sure that I knew at least the closing couple of miles very, very well to be able to judge it should it come down to a finish like we saw in the men's race. But I think when you're very fatigued, it helps to know that. And there is that gap back down to 52. So that's a substantial inroads that Shona has made from that 90-second lead at 35 kilometers to 52, but I think it's too much to make up in 2 kilometers of the race.
Well, we've had a real contrast here. 2 debutantes finishing first and second in the men's race, and a tried and tested marathoner with 4 years of experience here in Dubai, Worknesh de Geffer, on her way to victory.
Another look behind, I think. Her biggest danger is probably from tripping up by checking behind as much as she is. From the way that she's run this race, I would guess she was trying to send out a strong message to the Ethiopian selectors of run another Ethiopian national record here. That will underline my selection, and I'll be able to go into Boston and concentrate on racing that race there. She's found it's not quite gone all her own way, but I think it's still a very, very convincing run from her. Will it be enough for those very picky Ethiopian selectors? I don't know, but she can't do any more than what she's done today, I think.
Her 2:17:41 here last year, incidentally, is a national record, beating the rather more famous still Tiranesh de Baba, and that really, I mean, she should be heavily penciled in for Tokyo. Okay, as we look at de Geffer winging her way to victory in the women's race for what would be a repeat victory after her debut win in 2017, we're going to take a quick look at the 10K start here. This is one of the mass races, so part of the 30,000 entrants overall here in this 21st anniversary race of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. The Burj Al Arab, the famous hotel over there in the background, as the considerable masses make their way up the starting straight. So anything around about 35 minutes for the guys is going to be reasonably good in a race like this, Paula.
Yeah, and I think it's nice, it's encouraging for the 10K runners. A lot of them were talking about would they get the chance to see the finish of the marathon. So they have seen that fantastic race down the closing straight. They were lining up alongside the far side carriageway, where you can see that they just finished the men's marathon on. They won't get to see the finish of the women's, but they will have seen that, and now they get to head out there in still good conditions for 10-kilometer racing and enjoy being part of this race with that slogan, my city, my race, and then the number, as we talked about, of local runners actually getting out there and showing their pride in their city hosting these races.
Incidentally, our co-commentator Tim Hutchins has already gone down to the finish area. He's going to be interviewing the top men and women after they've all finished, so we'll be seeing him shortly.
And a quick note on the women's race. Hirpa is still in 3rd position, but she's about a minute further back behind Shona.
So big gaps in the women's race, Paula, after that spectacular mass finish in the men's.
Yeah, I think it's not really going to come down to the final 500 meters in this women's race at all. It will be a little bit of a lap of honor almost for Worknesh de Geffer, who did all of the significant hard work in the first 20 kilometers of this race, gathered herself through a rough patch and was able to then make further inroads and extend her lead much further before slowing down a little bit up to 40 kilometers, but she looks as though she's running very well now.
she can afford to slow down, and in fact she picked up contradictorily when the pacemaker dropped out. As you said, she may well have told him to get lost, and she certainly looked pretty good since then.
I do think that she did have a time goal in mind though, so that's why she won't relax. Down this closing 500 meters or so, she will keep her eyes focused on the road ahead of her and trying to run as fast as she can. She's outside of her personal best, but it is still a very good time. And there is Shona, who must know that she's well clear in second place and on target as well for a personal best, or very close to at the moment.
And the second prize, incidentally, is $40,000, so a handsome payday for Shona. But it looks like there's another six-figure sum in the bank for Worknesh de Geffer. I think she can dispense with looking around at this point. She's in the finishing straight. The gantry well in sight.
She will be able to hear the cheers of the Ethiopian cheer squad as well to help her just find a little bit more in the closing. She's picked up well from that predicted time earlier on, a dominance, and she's not had anybody to push her in these closing stages. It's all been down to her.
So victory in her debut here in 2017 in Dubai, fourth the following year, second last year in an Ethiopian national record. Worknesh de Geffer coming home to victory in the 21st anniversary race of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon.
Can she just get under the 2:19 barrier, because that is a significant barrier for her. I don't think she's going to make it.
Nevertheless, it's going to be another Ethiopian double-header after Adugna's maybe surprise victory in the men's race. Worknesh de Geffer, a tried and tested competitor when we were in Boston last year. She's going to go back there prior to the what we presume is participation in the Olympic Games in Tokyo in August, when the marathons are going to be run.
It's been a hard second half for her, but congratulations on the victory, 2:19.37 for Worknesh de Geffer, improving on that second place from last year.
And in fact, Shona seems to have picked up a considerable amount of time in the last kilometres, and a bit too late to really make inroads into a potential victory. Nevertheless, another Ethiopian comes in second place behind Worknesh de Geffer.
And a huge personal best, previous personal best of 2:23.32. That's, I made it about 2:20.10 for Shona, and as you said, closed substantially again in that final straight. You could just see her ready pink shoes coming into view in the top of the shot as de Geffer was finishing, and just showed how much she had closed that gap.
Well, last year we had an Ethiopian 1, 2, 3 in the men's race, but this year it looks like it's going to be top 3 Ethiopians in the women's race. Ethiopian did win the men's race from a Kenyan and another Ethiopian, but congratulations for an excellent personal best run from Shona of Ethiopia.
And here comes Hirpa now into the closing straights, and she, well, you can see the chasing feet in the top of your screen behind her, but I think she's reasonably clear and safe in third position down this straight.
Bernardo Hirpa, 2:21.32 she ran in Frankfurt in 2018, and she's going to be roughly, well, she's just going to be outside that, I think, here today. Nevertheless, $20,000 prize money for third place here.
And she's held it together well. She really, I think, felt the strain when Shona tried to push on and was trying to close on de Geffer ahead of her. She's had to run alone for the final 7 kilometers or so of this race, but she's held it together reasonably well.
Coming in third place, Bernardo Hirpa, the youngest of the elite women, only 20 years of age. Nonetheless, this is her 8th marathon. Third in Dubai and a $20,000 prize.
Deradida coming in is it to take 4th place in this race. 2nd, as we said in the World Cross Country, no, not 4th. She's chasing down 4th ahead of the Abayechu, who committed early to this race and went with that chase group of 3 women. Now coming under attack from Deradida behind her. I don't know whether there's enough time left in the race or not.
Well, speaking of times, Abayechu 2:24.15. She's certainly going to be under that. She's in 4th, and yet another Ethiopian in 5th place. Well, it seems that our 2 Mexican contenders may have gone off a little too fast in the men's race. They were looking to cement their claims for a Tokyo place, but they've gone well out to 2:13 and 2:16 finishing times. That's Faisa coming in.
Howie Faisa on her debut, also only 20 years old, and this is a fairly good debut from her, I think. She was 4th in the 5,000 metres, 2018 African Championships, and 2nd in the 2019 African Games. She has run 14:38 for 5,000 metres, and now has a 2:23.38.39 personal best for the marathon to her name.
Well, she was actually 6th in the World Championship 5,000 metres in Doha, so there's a woman who is still managing to combine very, very good track running with marathoning.
Well, I think this was her first foray into marathon running, maybe just to get a little bit of a taste of the waters for where she might want to go in years to come.
Well, big day for the Ethiopian spectators there. We've seen their women finish top 3 and win the men's race also. So once again, some spectacular racing. It might have been a bit warmer than last year, but at least we had the advantage of some cloud cover, so no direct sun to really heat up proceedings, much beyond the temperature that there was 3 or 4 hours ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the huge difference from previous years. The temperature has not climbed during this race today. It stayed around about the same as it was at the start, so maybe a little bit tougher in the first half of the race, but certainly better running conditions and racing conditions in the second half of the race.
Right, we're shortly going to go to an interview with the winner of the men's race. That's a Dugner of Ethiopia, winning on his debut.
I'm with Olika Adugna, the surprise winner of this 21st edition of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. What a run that was. I would like to ask through the interpreter, Olika Adugna, how surprised are you?
Dinqisiifatte mo'achuu kee kana irratti ammam dinqisiifattee siin jedhe.
Mo'achuu kiyya irratti baay'een itti gammadeeni. Guddaa isaa itti gammadeera akka mo'adhu kanan beek kiiloomeetira 40 irra waan ga'u finishingii waan qabu ofitti abdadheen deeme akka mo'adhu.
It says he is very surprised to win this one. When he arrived 40 kilometers, he believed himself in last sprint. By that case, he thinking he can win. And he is very surprised to win this race.
Does he think now that he has a good chance of making the Tokyo Olympic team, the Olympic team for Ethiopia?
Amma kana mo'achuu keetiin Olympic teamii nama raxan jettee yaaddaayi.
Olympic team irree namaratuudhaaf isaantu beekaa kanan biraa fiigeto kanan biraa fiigeto sa'aatii gaarii fiiguu danda'a kun hin qabame peesisaa dura waan qabameef ani immoo peesisaa waan qabamusaa waan finishingii qabu fiiges hin beeku ofitti marraun dandeenye jechaadha ofitti namanne jechaadha.
He says for this one is today we did not run fast. In the beginning parts the pace was not fast. I did not believe in myself to push the race, but in the inside of my body I feel better. But in this one, if I did not run other races, they did not select me for Olympic with only this result.
Well, if it matters, I think he deserves Olympic selection. It was a fantastic run. It won't be a surprise next time you win something. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Thank you.
thanks to Tim Hutchings, and thanks to our race winner, Alika Dugna, winning on his debut. That's the 14th Ethiopian winner here in the men's race in the 21 years, or the 21 events that we've had over the last 20 years. The women also have had their 14th victory.
Well, we are still waiting for official confirmation of the results of that race. It was clearly a win for Olika Adugne, followed by Eric Kiptanui. I think Sadat Abeji was in third there in the women's race. A win for Worknesh Degefa, had to work very hard for it in the second half of that race, from Gutanai Shone of Ethiopia and Tigist Abeyeju.
We're hoping to slot in another interview before we leave you. Okay, well, it's Marcel Hug and Sandra Graf, the two Swiss who have repeated victories in the wheelchair race. We're going to have a quick chat with them.
I'm here. This is Tim, just testing the line. Well, I'm with the winners of the wheelchair races here at this 21st Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon, and Sandra Graf winning the ladies' race, and of course Marcel Hug, as ever, winning the men's race. Fabulous performances, a Swiss double today. It's pretty special for you guys, but Sandra, your win looked very easy. There was nobody else in sight when you crossed the line. Was it easy, or were you pushing hard?
Es war not so easy. I'm pushing hard. The last 7K, we have the front wind, and it was really hard.
And what is next for you? I mean, I know that you guys can race a lot more than non-wheelchair races, but do you have a lot of races planned between now and the Paralympics in Tokyo?
Yes, I'm happy to can make a good time, and hopefully I can qualification for Tokyo, and the next marathon for me it's London.
London Marathon coming next, which is April the 29th. Well done, Sandra. Fabulous push today to win very, very comfortably. Marcel, you had company the whole way. There was the Chinese Zhang right behind you. It seemed for the whole race. Were you worried about him the whole time?
No, in the beginning he was also pushing in the front, but then he was trying, and I was talking to him. He was happy just to hang behind me drafting, so he could do a fast time. I was leading, but I asked him not to attack in the end, so I was leading the whole way, not to attack him also, so we both have now a fast time.
Is that unusual, though, agreeing to finish 1-2 in that order and not have an aggressive last kilometre?
It can happen, but it's quite unusual, yeah.
Well, listen, that's, again, another huge victory for you. I know you're familiar with being on top of the rostrum. You've won so many races over this last 2 or 3 years. What are your plans now? Is London the next big target?
I have the Tokyo Marathon first, in the 1st of March, I think, yeah.
Okay, Tokyo for you. Why are you not doing Tokyo, Sandra?
I make more hand cyclists. The marathon, it's get not so much. Go more for the hand cyclist races, and we'll go for Tokyo too with the hand cyclists. So why I go not to Tokyo with the Tokyo Marathon?
Okay, Sandra, well, listen, very good luck in London, and Marcel, for you in Tokyo and London, I guess. Good luck. It looks like you're both in fabulous shape as this Olympic year gets underway, so congratulations.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick look at the unofficial results. So that was Tim Hutchings, incidentally, with the wheelchair race winners, both from Switzerland, Marcel Hug and Sandra Graf. There's the finish area. Hoping to give you a quick look, and there is the confirmation of a debut victory for Alika Dugna of Ethiopia. The 14th victory in 21 races here, 206.15. Eric Tiptanui second, another debutant who great hopes for him, and that's certainly a terrific debut, a couple of seconds back. And Abeji of Ethiopia, 206.17, again just barely a stride behind. So a fantastic blanket finish in the men's race, probably the best finish we've seen in 21 years here in the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. It was rather more straightforward in the women's race. We'll take a look at those results shortly. Unofficial times, incidentally, but it's not going to vary by very much. And after a victory here in her debut in 2017 and fourth and second place in the following 2 years, Worknesh Degefa of Ethiopia wins yet again. A little slower than she would have hoped for, but an Ethiopian 1, 2, 3. Kuteni Shona second, but Atu Herpa of Ethiopia again third. So again, domination of Ethiopians in the women's race as in the men's.
So apologies to Herpa, Mr. off my earlier summary. Sorry about that, went straight to fourth.
Well, I dare say those Ethiopian guest workers will be appreciative. Thanks to our, you saw Tim Hutchings on screen there doing the interviews at the finish line. I'd like to thank my other co-commentator, Paula Radcliffe. That was the 21st anniversary race of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon.
Goodbye.